Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and Trump sides with the head choppers in Syria. He teams up with Al Qaeda and ISIS. Before we get into that, let's be sure you wipe your feet. You're in the House of Revolution. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, he sided with ISIS and Al Qaeda. He just had a $160 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, the founders of ISIS and Al Qaeda. The hell is Trump doing? Let's get into it.
So Donald Trump kicked off his Middle East tour, starting off with Saudi Arabia. And on the surface, this trip looked like a typical Trump production: gold-trimmed palaces, Arabian horses. There were F-15s that escorted alongside Air Force One while it landed. But what just happened in Saudi Arabia wasn't just about pomp and pageantry. It was actually a seismic shift, a turning point, in fact. Donald Trump, during his meeting, said some things that were quite extraordinary. First of all, he said one thing that I think shocked a lot of people, and that was to end sanctions on Syria. And this one I've got some mixed reactions to, but let's watch what he has to say.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
Now, that's a lie. That's a big lie. You're lifting the sanctions on Syria because now they're in the hands of Al Qaeda and ISIS. Syria will soon be signing a peace agreement with Israel. That's coming. But what he doing is he finna form an alliance to fight Iran. That's what his real goal is. He finna arm these radical terrorists. That's what the $160 billion deal with Saudi Arabia all about. He finna fund them. But all this lifting the sanctions on the Syrian people, he didn't give a shit about no Syrian people. Syria is in the hands of Al Qaeda now, who are killing Americans. Think they give a damn about that? They think Americans are stupid? Look at this guy. Look at this, the defense minister, but he really the ruler of Saudi Arabia. This the prince, bin Salman, the head chopper, ordered the chopping of the body of Jamal Khashoggi in the Turkish embassy, I think it was. But look at him. He's so happy. He's so happy ISIS and Al Qaeda. What does this man give a shit about Syria for? He tried to kill all the Christians and kill the Syrians and overthrow us all. Now look, he happy because he know Trump can be bought. Trump, y'all know Trump finna get a $400 million plane. It's free. It's a gift from Qatar, y'all. Oh, even some Republicans is mad because they ain't getting no $500 million plane. But look at Elon Musk back there too. This is disgusting right here. He making one big deal with Al Qaeda. Man, I thought this nigga said Saudi Arabia had something to do with 9/11. Remember, that's what Trump said. Trump was saying that. He said he was going to release all of the information. That just was a threat to Saudi Arabia to give him everything he wanted. A lot of Republicans was talking shit about Barack Obama was siding with Saudi. Joe Biden, y'all signed with the Saudis. We want truth about 9/11. The Saudis was in on it. Well, this man doing a big deal with Saudi and Al Qaeda, the perpetrators of 9/11. You see how that shit go? They think y'all stupid. Dude. Al Qaeda's back. These people clapping for ISIS. This is disgusting. Look at Walker Rubio.
So huge reaction to that. You see everybody standing up, giving a standing ovation, cheering. Why is that? Why did the Saudis care so much about the sanctions being lifted on Syria? It's because they want to get in there and they want to start building. They view this in a couple of different ways. They view this first as a stabilization attempt of the Middle East, which for them is very good. They want stable Middle East. This is a country that had been in civil war for
shit about no stabilization, no motherfucking Middle East. They want Iran out. They want Hezbollah out. You understand? They want Turkey out. They want to be controlling that shit. They want the Ottoman Empire controlling that shit. And it's a move. See, Trump, he gonna let Iran, he gonna let Saudi Arabia. See, it's a big fight. Saudi Arabia used to be under the wings of Turkey. Turkey ruled all these Muslims into World War I. You see? And Turkey was just strong arming their way back into Syria. Them flunkies was working for Turkey. Donald Trump is nudging in on this business now and putting Saudi Arabia in the motherfucking position to run Syria. They don't give a shit. They want to kick the Shiites out, put the Sunnis in. They don't give a shit about stabilizing the Middle East. This is Al Qaeda, big homie, Saudi Arabia. What the hell they give a fuck about stabilization of the Middle East?
For over a decade, and it's now over, and they see this as it's going to be over and we're going to be stable. Secondly, they see this as a massive investment opportunity. They plan to get in there. They plan to get all of their businesses in and start building and making a lot of money in Syria. So that's actually a pretty big announcement that Trump is going to be ending the sanctions on Syria. Of course, what did it take? It took Al Qaeda taking over the country in order for the United States to somehow become.
You see? Now that don't even make fucking sense. How can Al Qaeda take over the country? Now y'all saying, okay, let's do business now. Let's build a country up. What? That people should be shocked. Now that Al Qaeda in charge, now we can build a country up. Now we can take the sanctions off. When Al Qaeda wasn't running the place, sanctions, crippling your economy, starving y'all people. Al Qaeda in power, we relieving the sanctions. We're gonna help y'all. We're gonna help feed the people. Let's build a country up. Now, something don't sound right about that. These people is working with Al Qaeda.
Friendly and amenable to Syria. All it took was, after 9/11, I mean, the irony of this, after 9/11, all it took was Al Qaeda gaining a country in order for the Middle East to be stabilized a bit more. So this one is a bit mixed. Obviously, we should have been doing this under Bashar al-Assad. We should have not been sanctioning and trying to topple countries and doing regime change. But now it's happened. Al Qaeda's in, and the United States, with a big dose of irony, has decided to now normalize relations with an Al Qaeda-run country. But again, it's better for the Middle East. It's better for the people of Syria. Overall, it will be better. So we'll see. There's
how much did Al Qaeda give you to say this? Fuck no, it's not better for the people in the Middle East. Al Qaeda running your country, they killing all the Christians. Al Qaeda put black people in slavery. Al Qaeda is racist. I don't want to play these games. Ask the Libyans. Ask Africans what the fuck Al Qaeda doing, kidnapping women, kidnapping young boys, making them child soldiers. Yeah, that's Al Qaeda, the Salafists, the Wahhabis. This is a fact. So it ain't no better for no fucking Middle East if ISIS is in charge. That's propaganda, Kim. Why are you pushing that propaganda? Trump signed a deal with ISIS, Al Qaeda. He never gonna be able to live this down. He don't give a shit no more, bro. It's serious business. He done lost all the respect he can ever gain. It's out the window. He don't give a fuck about no 9/11. No U.S. soldiers who was killed. And this man say he killed General Soleimani because he had killed some American soldiers. Well, so did Giuliani, the head of Syria. He was the Al Qaeda boss, ISIS boss. He was blowing U.S. troops up too. Now you're praising him. See what I'm saying? That's crazy.
There's definitely some issues with the persecution, and people are being killed in Syria, and there's a lot of terrible things going on. And we'll try to talk deeper about what this means for Syria as the week goes on, or even into next week. Second thing that Trump said during his time in Riyadh is he alluded to potentially one day becoming allied with Iran.
Yet I'm here today not merely to condemn the past chaos of Iran's leaders, but to offer them a new path and a much better path toward a far better and more hopeful future. As I've shown repeatedly, I am willing to end past conflicts and forge new partnerships for a better and more stable world.
What a lie. Now, $160 billion weapons deal, biggest weapons deal in the history of humanity. That's what he signed with Saudi Arabia today. $160 billion. To see the Saudis, they can throw that. They could have did a $500 billion deal. They don't give a damn. They just making Trump look like he'll big done dollar, big for the American military industrial complex. But one should ask, who the hell they gonna use them weapons on? Who they gonna go to war with? Who they gonna fight? The Sunnis. Huh? See, they think he's stupid. Now he's saying, one day maybe I can have peace with Iran. Well, why are you giving their enemies $160 billion worth of weapons if you want peace with Iran? How stupid do you think we are? He think that's insane. That's like going to Ukraine, talking about he want peace with Putin, then leaving $100 billion worth of weapons. Putin be like, boy, are you nuts? You want war with me doing shit like that. So that's how the Iranians, and that's how Hezbollah, and that's how the Iraqi freedom fighters, and that's how the Houthi rebels, that's how they're going to see this. As you want war, you arming the radical Sunnis, the leaders of ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Even if our differences may be very profound, which obviously they are in the case of Iran, I have never believed in having permanent enemies. I am different than a lot of people think. I don't like permanent enemies, but sometimes you need enemies to do the job, and you have to do it right. Enemies get you motivated. In fact, some of the closest friends of the United States of America are nations we fought wars against in generations past, and now they're our friends and our allies.
Okay, so he does go on.
Al-Qaeda attacked you along with the CIA on September the 11th. And Saudi Arabia put it all into play, and that's a fact. Congress know that, and everybody else know that. And now you over there being buddy with Al-Qaeda.
To talk more extensively about Iran in this speech, where he says they cannot have a nuclear weapon. He reiterated that several times over, that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. But in this portion of the speech, he does talk about, hey, look, they don't have to be enemies forever. We can work this out. We could even partner with them, just like we're now really close allies with Germany, for example, after fighting them in a war. So he's alluded to, look, in the future, we can maybe normalize things. That is also music to the Saudis' ears. They want to hear normalization, normalization, normalization. They want to hear ending conflict, ending all of these, just ending all of this in the Middle East. They want to end all of that. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Trump did not make a stop to Israel, because Israel,
the U.S. become friends with is the ones they destroy, like Japan, like Germany. After you capitulate and you bomb to death and they kill your leaders and seize all your shit, then you could be a friend. That's what she must don't understand. That's what Trump is saying. Okay, we're giving them $160 billion worth of weapons, biggest weapons shipment in the history of humanity. You could be our friends one day after the all-out war with Iran.
Israel has been very much the source of a lot of that fighting in the Middle East, causing the destabilization. And so maybe when he says, all right, this trip, and this is the first time he's done this, gone to the Middle East and not stopped off at Israel, not said hi to Netanyahu, not done the whole, here I am, your lackey boy, willing to do whatever it is you want. This is the first time that that's not happening. And maybe it was a big signal to those in the Middle East that, look, things are changing. We are going to stabilize. We are going to normalize. And we're not going to be allowing this rogue nation anymore to come and terrorize all of you. And instead, we're going to try to be friends and do some deals. But this is the next clip is what I really want to show you. And this is Trump torching the neocons of the past. Absolutely incredible to hear this, especially from an American president. Watch this.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Thank goodness. Finally, somebody saying it out loud in America.
Bullshit. Hypocrite. Now, I'm so glad he showed that he's a fucking hypocrite and the emperor has no clothes. This the same administration that's saying General Touré in Burkina Faso is using the wealth of his country to protect himself. That's what he said. And he's a dictator. That's what they said. While now you praising dictators, real dictators, who say that they are absolute monarchs. Nobody has one word except the kings of Saudi Arabia. And they spend trillions of dollars of the motherfucking country's wealth on themselves. Now he respect their culture, their traditions. Huh? He not pushing gay rights on them. He not telling them they can't protect themselves with their money like he telling the fucking Africans. He call them dictators. You see the hypocrisy here. Now they say, oh, Trump, he's tired of the old days of just trying to bomb countries and waste our money. You just wasted billions of dollars trying to bomb the Houthis into submission. They refused to submit. That didn't work. So we're going to forget about that. He just tried to run that play on the Houthi rebels. They said, fuck him. Let's go to war. He wasted billions of dollars for no reason at all. But he talk about other presidents who did it. Nah, I got to call that phony out. Now you're sitting with dictators and praising them and their traditions. But you sent that house nigga out there to attack General Touré when he's building up his society. Why he don't get a chance to build his society up, but Saudi Arabia can get a chance? Man, what a joke. Not hypocrites.
American president saying it out loud, saying, all of those times we tried, it was a total failure. The neocons failed. This whole agenda coming out, nation building, toppling, telling you how to live your lives, telling you how to run your countries. And he said, look, you have a prosperous nation, you have a prosperous region, and you did it. Not anybody, no one else did it. Not these liberal neocons coming in to rebuild your countries and tell you what to do. No, they didn't do it. They wasted a lot of money. They wasted a lot of time. They caused a lot of destruction. It was you, the people, you did it. And that is so great to hear an American president say that. It's about damn time, quite honestly, because that was obvious. It's obvious. Leave people alone. We don't need to be spreading liberal democracy. We don't need to be trying to tell people how to live their lives or what kind of systems they need to be living under. We just need to be leaving people alone, doing business deals and allowing prosperity, because prosperity, when nations are prosperous, they stop hindering their people. I mean, that people get held back and they end up suppressed and oppressed when their nations are flailing. But when they're prosperous, people gain rights. People become prosperous too, just right alongside their nation. So it's nice to hear an American president actually say that. It's great to hear Donald Trump torch the neocons right there in that speech. Love to hear it. Love to see it. Thanks for watching this clip from
I believe in America and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do.
Okay, so he said it's God's job to judge other leaders. We're not here to do this. And in the clip that I had intended to show you, he also says that the so-called nation builder wreckers for more nations, basically we've gone abroad, told other countries, oh, you need to be better with women's rights or gay rights or democracy or diplomacy or anything like that. We go, and if they don't do it, we put pressure on them, we put sanctions on them, and we decide to start bombing. We're done with that. He says peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately come not from a radical rejection of your heritage. We want you to just go ahead and be Arabic, and we will respect that. Basically, this is huge. This is not how any president has ever spoken before. The State Department has a whole litany of press releases talking about how we disapprove of other cultures, and we're going to go over there and do something about it. It's not got us.
First and foremost, they have never told the Sunnis, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, what to do, what to say. They need to be better on women's rights, gay rights, let women do anything. They've never did that. They have allowed Saudi Arabia, them the real head choppers. They allowed the Qatar to do whatever the hell they want to those goddamn people, those subjects. That's they subjects. They royal subjects. So that these people tell like, oh, Trump was he didn't tell this to the people in Iraq. He didn't say this to the people in Lebanon. He's not telling that to the Iranians. Hell no. He's saying that the people who already do as United States say do. It's like, oh, this is a new day in the Middle East. Oh, what the hell? The man just lost a Middle East war to the Houthi rebels. He lost that war. Now he want peace. No more the nation destroying. You just tried to destroy a nation and wasted our money, man. We're not going to forget that.
That's anywhere, right?
That's right. We want to bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis now to discuss all of this. He's the host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Show on YouTube, and a lot of things to unpack. Colonel, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, appreciate your invite here. Glad to be here.
Our pleasure. First at just a high level, Benjamin Netanyahu, it seems like he is sort of scrambling right now. So, I don't know. There's a lot to unpack with what's going on in Israel. He's over the past 24 hours basically saying we're going full bore with our mission, our war in Gaza, doubling down on this position, while at the same time, President Trump is in Saudi Arabia took a few pot shots basically at Netanyahu, the way that I read it, unless I'm missing something here. And it seems that there's a lot of neocons in Washington, D.C. crying right now. What do you make of this?
Man, they playing good cop, bad cop with the fucking world. Putin ain't stupid. They playing good cop, bad. Netanyahu is the maniac. I destroy everybody. And Trump comes, I'm the peacemaker. Just deal with me, or the lunatic is going to kill all of y'all. This is easy to see what Trump is doing. Just make a deal with me and give me everything I want. Do as I say. Buy all of our weapons, sell your countries for our crappy weapons that's losing wars, and Netanyahu gonna wipe all of y'all out. Now they come in and say, oh, see, he's showing Netanyahu. What a joke.
I was cheering when I heard that, and I saw that clip that you were trying to show there a second ago, and I was just, I had to back the video up a little bit to like, did I just hear that right? Because I agree with you. I'm like, when have I ever heard an American president saying these things? I've been saying these things for a long time and wanting an American president to say them. Now, I will caveat by saying that your words are great, but they have to be followed with action too. But man, if he does any version of that, I mean, it could represent a sea change of positive for the United States, because what he said is so rational and logical. And that's what other people around the world want to hear, so that they can have better relations with us and more safety and security and more economic prosperity for us. So if he follows through with actions, that is fantastic.
Right. So, I'm watching these relations with Saudi Arabia. We've had all of these reports of Saudi Arabia, the MBS and his family and things that they've done. And I thought, wait, we're not supposed to like them, but can we be diplomatic? But it has to be across the board, is that we don't tell people how to be.
They want to be diplomatic with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is disgusting. See what happens when you can't tell the truth to your people?
We can do business with people if it, in fact, benefits both sides. And non-interventionist has to be absolute. So I can't then go digging into MBS and say, well, what am I supposed to think of that, right? You have to be a person of your word.
Well, look, I mean, it's a messy world that we live in, and you can't turn a blind eye and pretend nothing has happened. Or, I mean, sometimes you do have to take some actions, but ultimately the president of the United States, whoever holds that office, has the primary obligation to keep us safe and to ensure our economic prosperity. And sometimes that means doing business with folks you don't like. And it also means that you can use your influence to guide them in areas where you do want them to go, especially if that's mutually beneficial. And if it's away from those things that he's been accused of in the past, that's a bigger win than trying to just condemn it. And listen, sometimes condemning is what you have to do, but only in certain selections if it has a chance for a positive outcome. But especially what he was talking about with the war, he's talking about maybe lifting sanctions on Syria, or actually he did, because he wants to give them a chance. He doesn't want to go to war with Iran. He still says they can't have nuclear weapons, but he says he would much prefer diplomacy. I think there's a real shot at that. And listen, this whole thing about Netanyahu, he may want to go full bore on here, but he's got to be careful he doesn't go too far away from Trump, because he can't do any of that without this flow of American weapons, bombs, missiles, and everything else. So we have a lot of leverage over there. And Netanyahu, I think that he's going down a path that cannot succeed militarily and will harm Israel. And I hope that Trump comes to that same conclusion. But overall, I really like the direction this is going, especially the neocons crying, as you mentioned. That was great, too.
I know. I'm pinching myself because I really I don't want to get my hopes up in this situation. Like, is Netanyahu being boxed out? Trump, was furious that Netanyahu went around his back on a number of different issues. He doesn't like being upstaged. He doesn't like being, waking up and finding at 4 a.m. that Netanyahu has released a video message putting words in Trump's mouth. And you've seen the marginalization now of Mike Waltz within the Trump administration being pushed out in a lot of ways. So I don't want to get my hopes up too high here. Do you anticipate the United States really pulling back away from Netanyahu even more than we've already seen in the past 48 hours?
I certainly hope so. Not out of any animosity towards Israel. I have nothing but good thoughts toward the people of Israel, but because it's not effective policy. It's not good for Israel. It's definitely not good for us. Some of the things Israel doing, if you're going to be honest, they're clearly against international law. And all you have to do is just look at any of these images of people being starved. And listen, I'll pull one issue out. The fact that Israel is openly blocking all food to the entire population there is an absolute black and white against international law. You are giving corporate punishment to the 2 million people in the Gaza Strip, allegedly to put pressure on Hamas. That is illegal, and we should not support that. And I hope that Trump says that's not good for us. That's not good for our image to actually support that. So we're going to pull that back, and then that will force Netanyahu to have some policies that he can afford to do that may be better for that. But at any rate, we don't want to be associated with something that is so heinous as starving kids to death.
Right. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says, here's a quote, "There is no way that Israel will lay off Gaza, even if they get their hostages back." So he has at least dropped the veil that we're doing this to retrieve the hostages. He's saying, even if we get the hostages, we're going to keep going. He says, we'll take them and then we'll go in. There's no way we'll stop the war. He's saying we can make a ceasefire for a certain period of time, but we're going to the end. Now, that's the attitude they're taking to ceasefire talks in Qatar. What the Trump administration obviously has to do something about that. They can't allow a 30-day ceasefire and then go back in and completely raise the area. What do you make of this attitude going into negotiations? That's not a settlement.
It's not, and I think that this is coming closer. I think that the cockiness and the arrogance, after a while, you don't even worry about pretending because you've pretended on so thin of a lie in the past, and it seems to work. Maybe they're just not worrying about that anymore. But I've been saying since at least the first month of this war, way back into 2023, that if the Israelis wanted the hostages back, they could have had them back. There was a deal to be made. There was something on the table. If it was important to you, you would have prioritized that above everything else. They were still inside the Gaza Strip. They weren't going anywhere, but he has chosen not to. And of course, this last ceasefire, there was a golden opportunity. They would have had them all back by now if they had done all three phases of that. But Israel is the one that closed that back off. So actions speak much louder than words. And again, I hope that this influences President Trump's decision to not back failing policies.
Yeah, Netanyahu, clearly, you're absolutely right about that, Colonel, which is we've had multiple reports from different journalists, Jewish journalists right here on our show, who've said absolutely that Netanyahu does not want the hostages back. Once that happens, the war ends, and then Netanyahu is out of power. And that's why you had so many protests from families of the hostages protesting Netanyahu in the streets of Tel Aviv. So if they wanted these hostages back, they could have gotten them. And I also thought it was interesting that the hostage who President Trump was able to negotiate, Steve Witkoff, to get out of there, he was asked to meet with Netanyahu, and he said, "No, I don't want to meet with Netanyahu," because he knows.
I didn't see that part.
He kept him there. I mean, by all accounts, Netanyahu was instrumental in perpetuating his hostage keeping. So again, this has been a disaster of their own making. It's going to be interesting to see going forward how much this can continue inside of Gaza. I'll just get you out of here on this, Colonel, which is, are you surprised by like the neocon meltdown? I mean, you have like Ben Shapiro coming out basically in many ways slamming the Trump administration for this hostage negotiation by not using Israel to carry it out. They're like upset that we got an American hostage back.
Well, yeah, and you've also seen Mark Levin. He's just been melting down over a number of things. He's been upset with Trump. So somebody who just a couple of weeks ago was really excited because Trump put him on some board member of something. He was all excited. Now all of a sudden he's going against it because Trump is doing what he's actually campaigned on, which is America first. That's what the American president is supposed to do, is to prioritize our needs above any other nation. And now people, it just shows that some people actually don't want an America first foreign policy. They want an Israel first foreign policy, and then America if it works out. And I'm categorically against that. And again, I just want to reinforce, I'm absolutely not opposed to the people of Israel at all. I have nothing but good things about them. I want peace for all of them and for the Palestinian people, but priority comes to the American people from our president.
Right. Clayton said he had one more question, but I do too. When President Trump had strong words for Iran, he talked about how if he can't make a deal with Iran, he's ready to put maximum force economically. He did not make military threats. I mean, maybe a little, you could parse some out at the end. But to my mind, I heard, wait, he's actually not threatening war. He's threatening economic war. Now, we've already had sanctions with Iran in place for a long time. But do you hear hesitancy to go to war with Iran in those words? Because that's what I was hopeful for.
Yes, I actually covered that on my show earlier this afternoon, because when you saw some clips from, especially from late February and early March, Trump was basically said, hey, if there's not a deal, bombs are going to start falling. And we're in the last moment, folks. You know, we're right to the edge here of doing something. And there was something happened behind the scenes. And I'm trying to figure this out. But something really changed in Trump. And then he started switching to, actually, let's go down the diplomatic path. And I was the same with you. Well, I was listening carefully when he said that about Iran. And I noticed that the first thing he said was not there will be bombing. He just said maximum economic pressure, et cetera. And I agree that you could read, but there's some parsing later on that could imply that. But I think it's clearly he's laying out that his strong imperative, plus other comments he made during this speech, is that he does not want any war in this area. I don't think that the Saudi Arabians want any war. And if he wants all these good deals in there, the last thing you want is to have a war in the region. So I think these economic priorities are downplaying any kind of military priorities. So that's a good thing.
He's a businessman at heart, you know. So and I think maybe the right people have gotten to Trump. You know, we were hopeful that some of these neocons would be edged out, and it sounds like the right conversations, the pro-peace groups are surrounding Trump and maybe blanketing him, maybe protecting him from some of these neocons. That's the way that I'm seeing it right now. But Colonel Davis, we can
give him a little credit directly. This is along the lines of things he promised on the campaign trail.
I think that one of the problems in the first administration was that he had the right ideas and other people were working against it. So by surrounding himself with people who don't work against him, more of his good ideas come out. And I'm for that.
Yeah, like J.D. Vance, et cetera. So, Colonel, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for your insights on this. And we'll be watching. This is just the first leg of the Mideast trip here. A lot more news will be coming out of the Middle East in the next few days. Colonel, great to see you.
You bet. Appreciate it.
Announced that its forces had struck 26 military targets and installations in India during last week's operation, none of which were civilian. Director General of Inter-Services Public Relations Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry reported on Monday. However, while the exact nature of the targets and the extent of the damage have yet to be verified in detail, images and videos circulating online of what happened in the Pakistani Armed Forces massive strike. Visual evidence on May 10th, corroborated by Pakistani and Indian sources, suggests that the major strike was aimed at destroying weapons and military installations of the Indian Armed Forces, even deep inside Indian territory. Open sources reported that the Fateh missile hit a storage site of the famously advanced BrahMos missiles in the Indian town of Bias. A good move by Pakistani military, they removed the BrahMos and its supporting equipment so that it could not be used again, as General Chaudhry added that BrahMos missile facility, which had fired missiles into Pakistan and killed innocent civilians, was also destroyed. Apart from BrahMos, Pakistan said it had attacked Indian S-400 air defense system in a massive missile attack deep inside Indian territory. In retaliation, at least 2 S-400 were destroyed in Udhampur, along with Fateh-1 rocket launches and airstrikes across northern India. Satellite images show Udhampur Air Force Base and S-400 air defense system before and after the Pakistani attack. Further, a loud explosion was reported in Rajouri, Indian-administered Kashmir. This is a major Indian military base. Other Indian supply and weapons depots were hit during Operation Bunyan ul Marsuz. Another Pakistani retaliatory strikes were very heavy. Bad news also came from the Uri supply depot, security sources reported. The depot serves as a vital logistics hub for Indian Army's operations along the line of control to store and distribute ammunition, fuel, and military supplies. Meanwhile, Pakistani retaliatory strikes have brought nightmares to several Indian military bases in response to Indian earlier attacks on 3 Pakistani military bases. Fateh-1 missile reportedly hit the most important positions, targeting Indian air bases in Kashmir. Pakistan Air Force released satellite images revealing damage at Jammu Air Base, which was seen in more than 5 locations, while the Indian Air Force's Command and Control Center at Udhampur Air Base has been destroyed right in the middle, according to reports of missile attacks by Pakistan during the period. In Pathankot, Pakistan destroyed the Indian Army base after coming under heavy fire from rocket launchers. Indian air defenses, which were considered superior, failed miserably, and a fire broke out at the base, which houses a H-64 Apache, Dhruv helicopter, and other crucial Tejas equipment. On the other hand, Srinagar Air Base, which has been a symbol of Indian aerial dominance over Kashmir since 1964, get hit. This was allegedly when Pakistani missiles struck the military installation, which is the hub for dozens of daily combat flights for the frontline operations against Pakistan, is now damaged, as shown in satellite images. Pakistani military spokesman stressed the need for national unity, saying that the country has always stood firm like a steel wall in the face of threats, and must continue to do so. In this case, Pakistan launched a large-scale retaliatory attack on 26 Indian military bases and positions in Srinagar, Chandigarh, Gujarat, Delhi, and Rajasthan.
Least officially. Well, we're all in favor of. I'll need to stop you there because of the hour. Peace, love, and justice are indeed our worthy goals that we share, and they haven't been doing too well as ideals of late. That is for sure. I'm very glad that the firing has ceased, at least officially, along the line of control between India and Pakistan. The terrorist attack that you referred to was indeed a heinous and barbarous attack on civilian people. 24 or 25 people were cruelly murdered, most of them Hindus, but also Muslims and Christians. I said at the time, I say it again now, I believe that that terrorist attack was a false flag attack. I do not believe the story that the government of India gave. But that doesn't mean I want there to be a war between India and Pakistan. I definitely do not. As someone with a great deal of love for and experience in the Indian subcontinent, the very last thing in the world, on top of all the other issues of poverty and development, of actual terrorism, infiltrated into Pakistan, for example, from Afghanistan over many decades, fostered by the policies of the empire. The last thing I want to see is guns blazing and people dying between India and Pakistan. So I very much hope that that conflict will not restart. But I have to say, as I've said all along, as long as the people of Kashmir are not free to decide their own destiny, then the war between India and Pakistan is always waiting to happen. The only way of ensuring that there will be no future Indo-Pak wars is for the people of Jammu and Kashmir to be given what the United Nations unanimously in the 1950s decided that they must have, which is a free and fair plebiscite to decide where and with whom they want to be.
On. It is May 12th, 2025, and as India and Pakistan have agreed to a ceasefire, the focus is now on what happened during last week's deadly fight between the two and what weaponry was used. In particular, when it comes to Pakistan's side, the use of Chinese-made J-10 aircraft to launch air-to-air missiles, bringing down multiple French-made jets that were used by India. It's sending a very powerful message to the world about China's military might in terms of weaponry and technology and what that could mean for a future proxy war with the United States. I think it's safe to say that the US is not too happy about the current situation, but they are engaging in trade talks with China, talks which led to the Trump administration completely folding on its massive 100+% tariffs that they had imposed on Beijing, putting us in a situation where China wasn't harmed, but American companies sure were. We got into all of the latest and what it means for the ongoing tensions between the world's two largest economies with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Carl Zaw, a geopolitical analyst and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Carl, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, I'm glad I get to talk to you today. I know that there is a lot going on in the world, but I want to start off with the latest when it comes to this ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan, because they reached a ceasefire over the weekend after days of deadly fighting. But the discussion surrounding this conflict is not just about these two countries, it's about the weaponry they each used, which for Pakistan was Chinese-made J-10 aircraft used to launch air-to-air missiles, bringing down multiple Indian fighter jets that were made in France. So I want to know, how do you view this conflict and really what it has told the world about the capabilities of China and its military aircraft.
This is really, some people call this a deep seek moment for the Chinese weapon systems, because for the longest time, even though China has been upgrading its weapon systems, there's always a shadow of doubt that casted. Many people call the Chinese weapons knockoffs. They're not going to work. They're made in China, must be of shoddy quality. And now we've seen it went head to toe against the best, most advanced European fighter jet, the French-made Rafale. And, this is undeniable now. Now we have confirmation from both French intelligence official and American official that indeed the Pakistan-operated J-10C has shot down at least 2 Indian jets, at least one of which is a French-made Rafale, which cost over $100 million per plane. Whereas the Chinese made J-10C has a unit cost about $40 to $50 million per plane. So there's a big difference in terms of dollar terms. And on top of that, the India government is paying France for training and spare parts. So just 10 days before the conflict, India announced they had a new deal with France to purchase 26 additional Rafale jets for $7.4 billion. If you work out the math, that's almost like $284 million per plane. And in fact, it's quite embarrassing both for the Indian Air Force and the French company Dassault, which produced the Rafale plane. Because this is the first time Rafale has seen in combat, and it's the first time the Rafale has been shut down. And it was done by, again, a Chinese-made J-10C fighter plane equipped with a Chinese-made PL-15 air-to-air missile.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're noting there, because that was kind of the reaction that I saw to it, which is, for so long, yes, we've had all of this talk about China modernizing its military, right? But we haven't really known what does that actually look like. And I thought it was also interesting. I know you mentioned this over on X, that it was reported that obviously, yes, India is using these French fighter jets instead of the US made F-18s, amid reports that Washington has been pressuring them to make the switch. So I guess maybe good that they didn't have those, at least for the US, because that would have been really embarrassing. But this still sends a very important message about China's position in the global arms race. And yet China is the one that is not arming extremists, overthrowing governments, right? Kind of forcing its power on various countries around the world. That's the US, and the US tries to act like we have all of this military might. But what does that tell us when we're now in this position, when it's like China may be a real competitor, but they're waiting to show that might until it needs to be used?
One thing to note is China do not attach any preconditions when they sell their weapons. So Pakistan also bought American made F-16 jets, but US had Pakistan sign an end user agreement where Pakistan must agree not to use F-16 in a war with India, which kind of severely restricts the utility of F-16. And this is why in the latest conflicts, Pakistan relied on the Chinese J-10C instead. So this is a big difference. China will not use its weapon sales try to influence a country's foreign policy, for example, like U.S. often likes to do. And it's just purely about a monetary transaction. China sold weapons also to the Gulf country UAE, and now we have seen China is conducting joint air exercise with the Egyptian Air Force. There was amazing videos showing Chinese jet flying with the Egyptian Air Force over the pyramids in Cairo. And there's a rumor that Egypt will be next in line to acquire J-10C. And this latest air battle that took place in India and Pakistan, this only give further impetus for other countries who are thinking about acquiring Chinese jet, because first of all, they're proven to be reliable in battle, and it's a lot cheaper than the alternative. They're one third or one fifth the price of a European or American jet. and it's just as good in battle. So that would persuade a lot of people, especially in the global South countries, countries like Egypt, who would possibly look to diversify their military supplier when they realize, they may not be able to rely on Washington, in times of war. And here you have China, who can supply reliable weapon system at much cheaper price.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting aspect to this too, because instead of the US looking at this situation and saying, okay, maybe we should back off from China, right? Maybe we should stop trying to pursue an open proxy war against China. Instead, my fear is that the US and the neocons in Washington are almost going to double down and now wanting to target China even more, because we saw this when China started to increase its military spending, when it started to talk about wanting to modernize its military. The US started freaking out and was like, no, we have to go up against China even harder. So what are your concerns about the US march to war with China and where it stands right now?
Well, this should ring an alarm bell in Washington, because J-10C is not the latest in the Chinese arsenal. In fact, the People's Liberation Army Air Force is about to retire the J-10s in their inventory. Now they have already moved on to J-20, which is a stealth air fighter. J-10C is not a stealth air fighter. It's considered 4.5 generation fighter. And right now, China already are mass producing J-20 stealth fighters, whereas the U.S. equivalent is F-35. But we know F-35 is a really versatile plane, because sometimes it double up as a submarine in the bottom of the ocean. And let's face it, F-35 is such a boondoggle. It's not designed to fight a war. It's designed to feed the military-industrial complex. It's designed to make all the lobbyists rich from the kickbacks and make sure the top brass can retire comfortably in the Bahamas. They're not designed to fight wars. And then there's a matter of industrial capacity. China can crank out these stealth fighters at much greater rate than Washington at this point. And this is due to the policy of Wall Street to outsource American manufacturing to East Asia for the last 40 years. The manufacturing has hollowed out so much in the United States. Now it's starting to affect the defense industries. The Pentagon has admitted that China has 200 times the shipbuilding capability than the United States. The U.S. have about 3 shipyards that can produce warships, whereas any one of China's shipyards, China's Jiangnan shipyard next to Shanghai, is about 7 times larger than any of the American shipyards. And right now, United States is now going to seeking help from South Korea and Japan in order to help U.S. with a naval buildup. So essentially, the Pentagon already gave up on bringing manufacturing back home to the U.S. There was actually a U.S. law that prohibits United States from purchasing foreign warships. And now the Pentagon is working with the Congress to skirt that legislation. Now they're trying to get U.S. warship fitted, retrofitted, or built in South Korean shipyard, because it will be much cheaper. This is where we are today. United States now have to rely on South Korea and Japan to continue its naval buildup versus China. I mean, this is the kind of the sad state of the way that the U.S. elite have hollowed out its own manufacturing. Now it's even affecting the military-industrial complex. I think they were going to look at the air battle in India, Pakistan, and realize, oh crap, China has much more up their sleeves in terms of next generation weapons. Also, China just tested their 6th generation fighters, 6th generation stealth fighter, 2 prototypes, whereas the United States next sixth generation air fighter, the so-called NGAD, the next generation air dominance fighter, that's still on the drawing board. They're still debating whether it's going to be a manned aircraft, unmanned aircraft, and it's still at the PowerPoint presentation phase, whereas China already had their prototype flown in the sky, and they're looking to mass produce at maybe in the 2030s. So United States is already behind. It's behind so much now. US is falling behind in its military industrial complex. So that's where we are, Rachel.
Yeah, I never thought I would see the day, right? With the US, given the fact that, we talk about how the US has outsourced so much, right? So much of our manufacturing to other countries, and that the military industrial complex was our main product. And yet now we're seeing that that's not even going to be able to stand up to the competition from a country like China. Now, I do want to move over to the talks that are happening, right? We did see talks over the weekend happen in Geneva, which resulted in officials from both sides announcing that they reached a deal to roll back most of the recent tariffs and call a 90-day truce in their trade war for more talks on resolving these trade disputes. Now, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said that the U.S. agreed to drop its 145% tariff on Chinese goods by 115 percentage points down to 30%, while China agreed to lower its rate on U.S. goods by the same amount down to 10%. So how do you view the significance of these talks and of this deal that was just made?
Well, I have never seen top Chinese officials openly acting out so optimistically in a press conference. The Chinese vice premier, he was in talk with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He was practically beaming in the press conference. I mean, basically, Trump folded like a origami paper crane, and we're now rolling back all the way back to the quote unquote Liberation Day, right? So we're talking about China gets a 10% tariff, like all the countries in the world, plus the 20%, the so-called fentanyl tariff, and so that's the level before April 2nd, the so-called Liberation Day announcement. So what has the Liberation Day accomplished then? For US, well, not much. Well, I would argue for China, it actually accomplished a lot, because you show the world that US is not a serious country. And China actually come out looking like the true global leader. China stood up to the United States, and US backed down. And in return, that inspired other countries like Japan also to say no to the United States. This is I think there's the problem, Rachel, is that U.S., especially the Trump administration, they lack strategic clarity when it comes to China. They don't really know what they're doing, and this was reflected when the Japanese trade delegation was in Washington to ask them, okay, we're here to find out what you want, and the Trump administration came back with, what's your offer? And the Japanese delegation were totally confused, because they traveled all the way here to find out what the Americans really want, and then they came away with the impression that the Trump administration don't really know what they want, and so they ended up with no deal. And I think China went into this trade talk also trying to find out, exactly what's U.S. intention, and I think to everybody's surprise, Trump totally just folded and rolled back. But I guess not everything is lost. I'm sure the Trump's buddies made tons of money through insider trading, because we saw some suspicious activity just before the announcement of the Liberation Day. There were a lot of short position were placed on the stock market, and I'm sure there were a lot of bets before the market opened today on how, because the market is going to go gangbusters at this news for sure, and the people who would have no pre-knowledge of what was going to happen, they're making out like a bandits right now. But that's always the way it is in Washington, Rachel. It's always like, I like to say our government is is of the oligarchs, by the oligarchs, for the oligarchs. So they will walk away with more money in their bank, but this really hurt U.S. businesses and particularly small businesses. A lot of the bigger business like Walmart, Amazon, they might be able to eat, the kind of the disruption that happened over last month. But a lot of small businesses are getting wiped out. And even if the tariff are being rolled back today, it's the disruption to the supply chain is still in place because it takes 30 days to cross the Pacific. And even if they load up goods in China right now, it's take another 30 days for them to reach ports in New York and Texas. And so what we're looking at is, before the talks, we're about we only have 5 to 7 days of inventory at most of the businesses. So like if they let this drag on, things gonna get really bad in June and July. But so thankfully, we're not gonna see shortages on the shelves this time. Trump rolled back just in time. But I would argue he should have done it much earlier because Trump's base would believe anything he says. I mean, I already saw on Twitter, the same guy who back in April said China will bend the knee by this end of the month. Bookmark this, right? And now he's tweeting, China has caved. Okay, these people, they will believe anything. Like Trump had nothing to lose, literally reversing his position earlier than he did. But the damage is irreversible to the U.S. reputation around the world, unfortunately. Now the whole world have seen that these jokers in Washington, man, they're not serious people. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust. But the positive side is we might still be in time to save back to school sales. So that's where we are.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because even just looking at the tariffs that Trump was rolling out, as you were noting on this so-called Liberation Day, I mean, he's slapping tariffs on countries around the world they're going, hey, we're trying to work with you, right? We're trying to help you with this transition away from any reliance on China. And now you're hitting us with tariffs. How does this figure? And it almost kind of goes into, which is kind of the Donald Trump chaos, right? He runs around, he's like a bull in a china shop, and we're seeing this play out in a number of different ways. And then he pursues talks, right? We're seeing talks with Iran, talks with Russia. He's headed to the Middle East this week, and now he's dealing with talks with China. And yet I'm looking at all of this and knowing that the US establishment below the surface, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, they still want war with China, right? That is their ultimate aim. They want to weaken China just like they tried to weaken Russia, although they never learned from any of their failures. So lastly, I just wanted to ask you, what are your concerns moving forward? Even though, yes, we are at this point where China has sent a very powerful message about where its military might stand in terms of technology. The US and China are working things out, or at least Trump is figuring things out when it comes to tariffs. But what concerns still remain when you're looking at the future and kind of what is to come?
Well, you made a good point, Rachel, about, U.S. military still want confrontation with China. If one are to be super cynical, you would say what happened last month is actually a stress test, because U.S. Pentagon has been pushing for this decoupling from China for a long time. Their argument is our economic entanglement with China, tie our hands in case of war. And, they have said over and over, like the danger is that China might cut us off in case of war, right? It turns out everything is projection because Trump imposed an embargo himself. If China had unilaterally declared embargo against the United States a month ago, this would be treated as an act of war. But since Trump did it himself, now he literally flipped the game around. But I'm to be cynical, I would say this might be a stress test to see how much pain the U.S. public will take, facing with a cutoff with the trading goods from East Asia in case of war. This is why they let this whole thing drag out for a month and then try to restore the trade at the last minute. So people have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Trump administration decides to handle things involving China moving forward. A lot for us to continue to keep an eye on. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Carl Zaw.
These guys managed to piss off Iran. One of them by Mr. Senna, let's create another Gaza. They found a shop in India called Karachi Bakery and they started smashing the place up. The Indians managed to piss off the Saudis. The foreign secretary of India, the guy was being trolled so bad.
Arjun, युद्ध कर. Hey Arjun, युद्ध कर, ये गीता में लिखा है.
Assalamu alaikum guys and welcome to another episode of Smile to Jannah. Before the end of this video, I want you to be familiar with two words in particular. Akhand Bharat. This concept, I want you to add it to your vocabulary, and what it is reflects the vision of India at this moment in time. It will explain why they are doing what they are doing and why the sentiment of the extremist Hindu and nationalist people of India are like the way they are. Well, quite literally, it means undivided India. But the reality and implication of this is Hindu supremacy over the Asian region. That's what it is. It's a old mythical empire of Hindus spanning 10 countries, some of which are India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and the likes. And they believe that when their god Vishnu comes in human form, in the form of Ram, he will then help them fulfill this vision of the new Hindu empire. As you know, India occupies Kashmir at this moment in time, and Amit Shah, who is the Minister of Home Affairs, when Article 370 was revoked from Indian occupied Kashmir, which revoked their special status and autonomy, actually praised it as a step closer to Akhand Bharat. If that's not it, you have the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath. He also has said with the coming of Modi, they are one step closer to, say it with me now, Akhand Bharat. It's a very similar concept to what Israel believes. They have a concept called Greater Israel, but that's for some other time. This nationalistic Hindutva version of India is not going anywhere fast. And that's why you see, especially in the comments, Afghans siding with India. So India is having very good relations with the neighboring countries, exerting their control and dominance over them because, as the seniors of the BJP are saying, Akhand Bharat is in the mind. Now that I've got that important point across, this video is dealing with the fact that India has lost the digital warfare. Their reputation on a global scale has taken a hit, a big hit. Why? Because they have taken some dumb decisions. This video is centered around responding to these two tweets. Yeah. One is saying international media has turned viciously against Bharat. Remember Bharat? Bharat is the word that they want for India. They know now India was a term that emanated from the British colonization of the region. That's not the term that they like, nor do they want. Bharat and eventually Akhand Bharat. So then he cited the New York Times, in which they called Pakistan foreign minister. And when it came to India's, they said India's nationalistic external affairs minister. The guy was pissed. Then there's another tweet, which is how the F is Pakistan, of all countries, having a good PR, especially among Gores. Gores is the white man. Now, in no particular order, this is what's been going on in the last couple of days, which will inform us as to why the digital warfare of India has not only been lost, it's been incredibly damaging for them. And Akhand Bharat. So I'd throw that in just in case you forgot. So you must have seen from my previous videos in which I mentioned the night of disinformation, that Indian media was telling the Indian public that they had literally taken over Pakistan. The Prime Minister had surrendered, Islamabad had fallen, and that sort of stuff. So Karachi port was part of the disinformation. It become a meme because people from Karachi were saying that they've taken this place over, that they've destroyed the port. It seems absolutely fine. Even BBC jumped in as well, saying we sent our journalists there. Everything's fine, mate. So trying to redeem themselves from that embarrassment, what did they do? They found a shop in India called Karachi Bakery. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen. It's all over social media. They went there and they started smashing the place up. Why? Because it is named after a city of Pakistan. Now, you have some Hindus which are of the opinion that Karachi, pre-partition, was majority Sikh and Hindu. In fact, its name emanates from a Sindhu Hindu goddess called Mai Kolachi. It's not a majority view, but it is a view that these people believe in. If that's the case, why are you bothering somebody that just happens to have the same name? I mean, they had that bakery before all of this kicked off. How is it the guy's fault? What has he done? What has this bakery guy done? In fact, Pakistanis are saying in a place there called Hyderabad, there is a bakery. Yes, it's called Bombay Bakery. I checked this out and you can see this on the screen. It's owned by a Hindu and it's absolutely safe and fine. So when people are seeing the reaction and comparing the two reactions, they are realizing that these extremist Indians are nuts. Secondly, Bollywood has been on side with Operation Sindoor. The three Khans have not been speaking out, which credit to them. And a lot of you may or may not know, Shah Rukh Khan's father was actually from Peshawar, which is in Pakistan.
My family is from Pakistan. My father is from Peshawar. I'm very proud of it. I'm from Kisa Khani, Lahori Dihati, and I have my whole family still there. I would love to go and meet them, and I would love to. I've been to Pakistan many times when I was younger. My father took me.
That might be the reason he hasn't been speaking out either. But Salman Khan only spoke out when the ceasefire was announced, hailing the ceasefire and glad, just like any human being with a beating heart would be happy that there are no more killings happening. But he was being rinsed out in the media completely. He had to delete the tweet. If that's not all, these guys managed to piss off Iran. Yes, a retired army general and TV host, Gaurav Arya, called the Iranian foreign minister the son of a pig. The clip, of course, went viral in Iran, and those guys weren't happy. The matter escalated to such a degree that you had the Indian embassy that had to get involved and put out a tweet literally disowning this guy, even though he used to be an army general. Next, a Muslim that was killed. The Indian medias took that and accused him of being a terrorist when the guy was not. There was no evidence at all to suggest that. They merely looked at his face and the anger in the country, they kind of just went with it. However, now News 18 put out an apology.
ये सिर्फ एक मानवीय भूल थी और इस गलती के लिए हमें बेहद अफसोस है.
Why? Because most likely they would have been sued otherwise. Next, the foreign secretary of India was the one that made the announcement of the ceasefire. The guy was being trolled so bad that the Indians revealed private information of his family, such that if you go on his Twitter handle now, it has been made private. Next, the Indians managed to piss off the Saudis. There was a clip going round in which the Indians were standing on the flag of Saudi. Now, the flag of Saudi has a declaration of faith, which is an Islamic declaration. So that's why there is more of an outrage when people disrespect the wordings on the flag. So you had a prominent Saudi journalist getting involved in this and expressing his outrage. Next, people were comparing tweets from the official BJP, the ruling party of India, their Twitter handle. And here you can see on the screen, it says, "No patience for futile peace talks." Yeah. And anyone who was following the Indian narrative knew that these guys wanted damage, mate. Yeah. And what happened? Look at the second tweet. "Ceasefire after talks," which even the Indian media admitted that it came from them.
Their External Affairs Minister Ajit Doval has told the US about and also briefed the US on Pakistan's nuke moves.
Next, these disgusting tweets that it's the sentiment of a lot of extremists currently in India. One of them by Mr. Sena, "Let's create another Gaza." Those terms that we use for what's going on in Gaza, they want the same thing over here. This guy, Amit, saying, "There was no innocent Palestinian. There is no innocent Pakistani. No amount of dead babies and wailing widows is changing my mind." Both tweets are still up. And following on from this BJP nonsense, Modi has come in front of the nation. And this has become a meme now. He's saying, he's expressing shock. Pakistan, rather than attacking itself, is attacking India.
आतंक पर भारत की कार्रवाई का साथ देने के बजाय पाकिस्तान ने भारत पर ही हमला करना शुरू कर दिया.
I mean, how dumb is this guy? Is he really telling the nation and surprised and shocked that Pakistan not attacking itself? I'll leave this to you guys to explain. And lastly, we saw countries like Azerbaijan. There's video footage of them celebrating. I've been told that people even in Nepal are celebrating as well. Loads of clips of individuals on X siding with Pakistan. Now, bearing all of this in mind, is it any wonder that Indians are furious with Modi?
This does not stop. Or he is overthrown. It does not stop. Don't stop it. Don't stop it. Arjun, युद्ध कर. Hey Arjun, युद्ध कर, ये गीता में लिखा है.
They have been embarrassed on a world stage. They had the top of the line French jets, and now the French are embarrassed of them. Why? Because Pakistan with their made in China jets. Normally made in China is an insult. Yeah, your watch is made in China, mate. Pakistan went with made in China jets and missiles and beat the crap out of India. Like, this is incredibly embarrassing. In fact, have a look at this tweet. This guy is very anti-Muslim and Pakistan. He had this Vice news. He had this interview with Vice in which the guy was spewing utmost garbage. Even this guy is questioning the gospel according to Modi. Ladies and gentlemen, let's leave it there. But before
Kashmir conflict has shaped South Asian geopolitics for more than 7 decades. The struggle between India and Pakistan over the territory has led to multiple wars, and the area is now one of the most militarized in the world.
On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons.
Pakistan says it is retaliating after accusing India of striking 3 of its air bases overnight.
Recently, a clash unfolded between the biggest global rivals, Pakistan and India.
Pakistan's Prime Minister has accused India of igniting an inferno with the missiles it launched at his country overnight.
While the conflict didn't spiral into an all-out war, some skirmishes took place, which ended up completely changing the dynamics of modern warfare. Chinese-made jets and missiles, which had never seen warfare before, were put to use, and in a moment which stunned the whole world, Pakistani fighters came out on the winning side by downing multiple Indian jets, including the famous French-made Rafale, with Chinese jets and missiles. Today's episode will uncover the Pakistan-India conflict and how Chinese-made air-to-air missiles downed Indian Rafale jets with ease.
Some breaking news. Pakistan says it has launched a military operation against India. Pakistan claims to have struck 5 key military targets in response to what it calls recent Indian aggression.
In a stunning moment that may very well change the future of aerial warfare forever, a Chinese-made air-to-air missile has proven itself far beyond expectations. The world has just seen what Chinese technology and Pakistani Air Force is truly capable of. And it is no exaggeration to say that the game has officially changed. In a recent clash between Pakistan and India, a Rafale jet, one of the pride and joys of Western fighter aircraft, was taken down from over 100 kilometers away by a Chinese PL-15E missile fired by a Pakistan Air Force J-10C. This marks not just a major success for Pakistan, but a monumental leap for China's military technology. What happened was not just a routine skirmish. It was a defining moment that highlighted how far ahead China has come in terms of missile technology and radar systems. Experts are now seriously questioning the effectiveness of Western aircraft, especially after this bold and clear demonstration of Chinese and Pakistani superiority. For years, there has been doubt cast on whether China's military development was more about quantity than quality. But this incident has shut down that question completely. China is not only catching up to the West, it may already be ahead in several key areas. The Rafale jet, considered one of the finest products of French aviation, had never lost in combat before. It was sold to India with high praise, often compared as a cheaper alternative to top-tier American or British aircraft like the F-35 or the Eurofighter Typhoon. India spent billions of dollars acquiring 36 Rafale F-3R jets, their most advanced version, with hopes of intimidating their neighbors and boosting national pride. But now, after 3 of these jets were shot down by Pakistan Air Force, that pride has taken a serious hit. Let's break down what happened. According to both Western and Pakistani intelligence sources, the missile that made history was the PL-15E, a long-range air-to-air missile capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds. When fired, it is first launched with a rocket booster, sending it flying at Mach 5. That's over 6,000 kilometers per hour. It is initially guided by the radar of the launching jet, in this case, the Chinese J-10C. But once it gets close to the target, it switches to its own internal radar. And not just any radar. This is where China's real advantage shows. The missile contains a miniature active electronically scanned array radar. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The AESA radar in this missile is what experts are calling a gold standard. China has managed to pack this advanced radar technology into a 200-kilogram missile, giving it the ability to track and strike targets with incredible precision. For comparison, America's Phantom Strike radar system is miniaturized to 60 kilograms, but it's used in a completely different context. China has made it part of an active, combat-ready missile. This is no lab experiment. It's already operational and successful in real-world combat. Imagine you're flying a $100 million jet, fully confident in your advanced Western training and equipment, and suddenly, without even seeing your enemy, your plane explodes mid-air from a missile fired 100 kilometers away. That's the kind of shift we're seeing in modern warfare. The days of close-range dogfights are slipping away. Instead, the future belongs to long-range missile sniping, and China is already leading the way. What made the difference in this battle wasn't just the missile, but the entire system China has built. The J-10C fighter jet, which launched the attack, is equipped with one of the most powerful radar systems in Asia. These jets, supplied to Pakistan by China, form the edge of the Pakistani Air Force. Despite India having a larger air force on paper, it's becoming clear that Pakistan, with China's support, has the upper hand in quality and training. Some may ask, how is it that a smaller force can outperform a larger one? The answer lies in technology, discipline, and partnership. China has given Pakistan not just weapons, but also an edge. This battle has also raised serious questions about India's preparedness and equipment. The Rafale jets that were shot down apparently did not have ESA jammers installed, devices that could have potentially interfered with the incoming missile's radar. Western jets like the F-35 and British Typhoons are often equipped with these systems, allowing them to send out concentrated beams of electronic noise that confuse or deflect enemy missiles. If India's Rafales had this, maybe the outcome would have been different. But the fact remains they didn't, and now the wreckage is being examined by experts, including embarrassed French engineers, who are no doubt trying to understand how one of their most advanced aircraft was taken down so easily. In fact, this isn't just a military issue. This is a political one too. China has always stood by Pakistan as a close ally, while India has leaned heavily toward the West, signing defense deals with France and the US. This incident is a strong message. Chinese defense technology is not just insane, it's combat-proven. And more importantly, it's available in large quantities. While the West continues to sell expensive systems in small numbers, China is producing and exporting highly effective systems at scale. Also, battle didn't just change opinions in Asia. It made the whole world take notice. Countries in the Middle East, Africa, and even Latin America are now paying close attention. Why spend hundreds of millions on American or European aircraft when China can offer something just as effective, if not more, at a much lower cost? Another important aspect is that the PL-15E is not just fast and accurate, it is also smart. If it senses jamming, it can immediately switch to another frequency, making it extremely hard to stop. It's not just brute force, it's a missile with brains. This is the kind of innovation China has focused on in recent years, investing heavily in artificial intelligence, radar development, and real-world testing. While others are stuck in bureaucracy and inflated budgets, China is building systems that work. The Indian Air Force now knows that their expensive Rafales are not invincible. In fact, they are vulnerable, very vulnerable, to Chinese missiles. This changes the strategic calculations in South Asia. Pakistan, which was often seen as the underdog, has now shown that with the right support from China, it can match and even defeat a technically superior enemy. Pakistan's Air Force has always remained a top-tier air force worldwide. This is a complete win for both nations and an absolute embarrassment for India and its Western allies. With much about the Pakistan-India conflict and how Chinese made air-to-air missiles downed Indian Rafale jets with ease covered, it is time to wrap this one up.
Last week, Pakistan's Air Force stunned observers by claiming the downing of 5 Indian aircraft through a revolutionary ABC data sharing system. Rather than relying on a lone fighter jet to detect, launch, and guide its own missiles, Islamabad synchronized ground radars, patrol fighters, and airborne warning and control system aircraft into a single networked chain of command. A detailed report published by China Space News, backed by the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation and China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, revealed how this advance may fundamentally reshape the balance of power in South Asian airspace. At its core, the ABC model separates detection, launch, and guidance into 3 specialist nodes. First, ground-based radars, A, lock onto hostile aircraft beyond visual range. Next, patrol fighters, B, receive those coordinates to fire air-to-air missiles from safety. Finally, AWACS, C, maintain continuous tracking, steering the weapons to their targets. This contrasts sharply with conventional tactics that demand a single jet perform every role under intense time pressure. A. Node employs advanced surface-to-air radar arrays capable of detecting low-signature fighters at extreme distances. These systems feed live target data into a secure battlefield network, automatically assigning priority tracks. By automating the lock-on process,
Pakistan achieved split-second target acquisition without risking manned aircraft in the most dangerous first phase of engagement. With the target coordinates in hand, Pakistan's patrol fighters, designated B, launched their missiles from safe standoff ranges. Models such as the J-10CE carried beyond visual range missiles, including the PL-15E, which carries an active radar seeker. This separation of launch responsibility allowed the fighters to avoid the intense dogfight environment and focus solely on accurate missile employment. After launch, the Airborne Warning and Control System aircraft, AWACS, took over missile guidance, leveraging their 360-degree sensor arrays. Platforms like the ZD-KA-03 relay mid-course corrections in real time, ensuring that even evasive maneuvers by the Indian jets could be countered. By extending engagement windows well beyond what a single fighter could manage, the C node turns each missile into a nearly unstoppable smart weapon. China Space News, the official mouthpiece for China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation and China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation, described Pakistan's system as systemic and asymmetric, a clear sign that networked intelligence now trumps mere firepower mass. Their analysis pointed out that while the United States and Russia had experimented with a launched by A, guided by B approach, Pakistan's introduction of a dedicated C guidance node represents a leap forward in combat architecture. Although the report emphasized tactics over specific equipment, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute data show that Chinese arms accounted for more than 80% of Pakistan's imports over the past 5 years. Publicly released footage confirms deliveries of the HQ-9P surface-to-air missile system, alongside ZDK-03 AWACS, J-10CE fighters, and PL-15E air-to-air missiles. Together, these platforms form the backbone of Islamabad's newly unified combat network. According to Chinese analysts, India's focus on purchasing individual systems without fully standardizing data links left critical seams in its air defense architecture. Indian statements admitted to compatibility issues among different AWACS, ground radars, and fighter platforms, creating delays in threat detection and response. In modern air combat, even a 1-second delay can prove fatal, and Pakistan's synchronized chain eliminated that vulnerability. What truly set Pakistan apart was the shift from exchanging volleys of weapons to orchestrating coordinated, data-driven strikes. Analysts noted that a cost-effective system focused on precision and real-time network control can neutralize an opponent's numerical superiority. The ABC model demonstrates how intelligent, asymmetric tactics are becoming the decisive factor in 21st century conflict, forcing militaries worldwide to rethink traditional doctrines. Looking ahead, the China Space News report suggested that unmanned aerial vehicles could slot seamlessly into this network. Drones can exploit low-altitude blind spots to gather intelligence or launch missiles themselves, further complicating an adversary's decision-making. By serving as both scouts and strike platforms, unmanned systems promise to amplify the ABC concept, turning every node in the network into a potential launching pad. Facing the reality of ABC-style operations, New Delhi has begun initiatives to consolidate its command and control architecture. Efforts are underway to adopt common data link standards across Sukhoi 30 MKI fighters, indigenous Netra airborne early warning and control systems, and ground-based radars. Pilot exchange programs and joint exercises aim to refine interoperability, while rapid upgrades to secure communication nodes promise to shrink the delays that once plagued threat response. As networked systems rise, adversaries will inevitably target the digital backbone. Electronic countermeasure suites, capable of jamming or spoofing radar and data link channels, are already in development. Likewise, strengthening cyber defenses within airborne warning platforms and ground stations has become a priority for both sides. Hardened encryption protocols and intrusion detection software will be essential to ensure that ABC chains remain unbroken under hostile fire. While unmanned aerial vehicles have demonstrated their value as scouts and missile platforms, the true game changers may be artificial intelligence-powered decision aids. Machine learning algorithms can sift through terabytes of sensor data in milliseconds, automatically assigning targets and suggesting optimal shoot-look-shoot sequences. Integrating AI into ABC networks could further compress reaction times and outpace any human-only coordination model. The success of Pakistan's ABC approach has sent shockwaves through regional security circles. Islamabad's embrace of Chinese hardware and joint development projects underscores a deepening military partnership. At the same time, India's accelerated push for domestic system integration underpins its Make in India defense ambitions. As each capital races to build more resilient, intelligent air defense networks, South Asia's aerial balance of power is being rewired for the network-centric era. Pakistan's recent success underscores a critical lesson. The future belongs to those who master information flow, not just those with the largest arsenals. As militaries around the world race to integrate systems and unify data links, the ABC warfare model stands as a harbinger of a broader shift toward network-centric, intelligent, and asymmetric combat. South Asia may have witnessed only the opening act, but the stage is now set for a profound transformation in how wars are fought at 30,000 feet and beyond.
For many decades, France was like the big brother in the Sahel, controlling much of what happened there because these countries were once French colonies. But recently, France has been leaving, and China, the quiet observer, has been stepping in, bringing gifts of weapons, military equipment, and promises of protection and friendship, just like the three wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to visit baby Jesus. But this time there are three babies: Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. But why is China suddenly so interested in this dusty, troubled region of Africa? What does China hope to gain? And how are these changes reshaping one of the world's most strategically important, yet vulnerable regions? The answers might surprise you, and they tell us a lot about how power is shifting in our world today. Before we dive deeper into this fascinating story, let's understand where it's taking place. Picture this. The Sahel is a giant belt of semi-desert land that stretches across Africa, just south of the mighty Sahara Desert. Think of it as a transition zone, not quite desert, not quite grassland, spanning countries like Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Chad. This region has always been challenging to live in. The land is dry, rainfall is unpredictable, and farming is difficult. Yet millions of people call it home, with rich cultures and histories dating back thousands of years. In recent years, this region has faced growing problems: climate change making farming even harder, terrorist groups causing mayhem, and weak governments unable to provide basic services to their people. But beneath this difficult landscape lies treasure. Niger has some of the world's best uranium, the stuff used to make nuclear power. Mali has gold and potentially valuable lithium for batteries. Burkina Faso has gold and other minerals. These resources have long attracted outside powers, particularly France, which used uranium from Niger to power its nuclear plants back home. So why is China now stepping into this complicated picture? And what does France's exit mean for the people who live there? Let's take a journey through time to understand how we got here. Ever since the late 1800s, France controlled these lands as colonies, taking resources and setting up systems that benefited French interests. When these countries gained independence in the 1960s, France didn't completely leave. It kept military bases, special economic deals, and strong influence over the governments. Many people in these countries started feeling like France was still acting like a colonial power, even though on paper they were free. France said it was staying to help fight terrorism and bring stability. In 2014, it launched a big military operation called Operation Barkhane, sending thousands of French soldiers to fight against terrorist groups in the region.
But as years passed, terrorist attacks didn't stop. In fact, they got worse in many places. Why are French soldiers still here if they're not making things better? Many local people began to ask, are they really here to protect us, or to protect France's access to our resources? These questions grew louder and louder. In Mali, military officers took over the government in 2020 and again in 2021. In Burkina Faso, military leaders seized power in 2022. In Niger, soldiers overthrew the government in 2023. All these new military governments had something in common. They wanted France to leave, and leave France did. First from Mali, then Burkina Faso, and finally Niger. French soldiers packed up their equipment, closed their bases, and flew home. For the first time in over a century, French military power was no longer directly present in much of the Sahel. This created a vacuum, an empty space where French power used to be. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does international politics. Someone was bound to fill that empty space. But who? While France was struggling with its deteriorating relationships in the Sahel, another country had been quietly building connections across Africa: China. China's approach was different. Instead of sending soldiers, China sent construction workers to build roads, bridges, and buildings. Instead of military bases, China built hospitals and stadiums. While Western countries often attached political conditions to their aid, China simply said, "We won't interfere in your internal affairs. Let's just do business." This approach won China many friends across Africa, but for a long time China kept a lower profile in the Sahel specifically. The region was seen as France's backyard, and China didn't want to step on French toes. China focused more on Eastern and Southern Africa, where rich deposits of minerals could feed China's hungry industries. But as France began withdrawing from the Sahel, China saw an opportunity. Here was a region with valuable resources: uranium in Niger, gold in Mali, potential lithium deposits across the region, suddenly open for deeper engagement. More importantly, China had already invested billions of dollars in these countries. The China National Petroleum Corporation had spent over $4 billion developing oil fields in Niger and building a 2,000-kilometer pipeline to take that oil to the coast. Chinese companies were mining gold in Mali and Burkina Faso. Chinese construction firms were building government buildings, roads, and other infrastructure projects. These investments needed protection. With France leaving, who would ensure these projects remained safe from terrorist attacks or political instability? China decided it would have to play a more active role in security. But how could it do this without repeating what many saw as France's mistakes? How could China protect its interests without appearing like a new colonial power? The answer came in the form of a carefully calibrated strategy that mixed military assistance with economic partnerships, a strategy that's reshaping the Sahel today. In January 2023, a shipment arrived in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Inside were brand new armoured vehicles manufactured by Norinco, China's largest weapons manufacturer. This wasn't just any weapons delivery, it was a statement. While Western countries had been reducing military support to Burkina Faso's new military government, China was stepping up. More shipments followed, including VN-22 armoured vehicles designed to withstand the kinds of roadside bombs frequently used by terrorist groups in the region. Around the same time, Norinco opened a sales office in neighbouring Senegal. It wasn't just looking to make a few weapons sales, it was planning a long-term presence in West Africa's military market. In Mali, another country where soldiers had taken power and pushed French forces out, China signed a deal to provide military equipment, training, and even technology transfer. This meant Mali wouldn't just get Chinese weapons, it would start learning how to make some military equipment itself. Most recently, China appointed its first ever defense attaché to Niger, a military diplomat whose job is to strengthen ties between the Chinese and Nigerian armed forces. At the ceremony introducing Colonel Major Chen Shuming, the Chinese ambassador promised China would support Niger in strengthening its security capabilities and in the fight against terrorism. What makes China's approach different from France's? For one thing, China isn't sending its own soldiers to fight. There are no Chinese military bases in the Sahel, no Chinese combat troops patrolling the desert. Instead, China is providing the tools and knowledge for local forces to fight their own battles. Secondly, China doesn't publicly criticize how these governments are run. When soldiers took over in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, Western countries condemned the coups and cut aid. China simply continued business as usual, treating the new military rulers as legitimate partners. But is China's growing military influence in the Sahel purely about selling weapons? Or is there a deeper strategy at play? To understand that, we need to look at what China really wants in Africa, and what might stand in its way. When China looks at the Sahel, it sees much more than a market for weapons. It sees critical pieces in a much larger puzzle, China's long-term strategy for global influence. First, there are the resources. Niger has high-grade uranium ore that accounts for about 5% of the world's uranium mining output. For decades, this uranium helped power France's nuclear plants. Now China, which is building more nuclear power plants than any other country, wants to secure that supply for itself. Niger also has oil, which Chinese companies have been developing since 2008. The $4+ billion that China has invested in Niger's oil industry isn't just about the oil itself. It's part of China's strategy to diversify its energy sources so it's not too dependent on any one region. Then there's Mali, which has significant gold reserves and potentially valuable lithium deposits. Lithium is crucial for making batteries for electric vehicles and electronics, industries where China is a world leader. Securing access to lithium sources around the world is a top priority for Beijing. Beyond resources, the Sahel offers China strategic transportation routes. That 2,000-kilometer pipeline carrying Nigerian oil to the Atlantic Ocean is just one example. China has also been building and upgrading roads, railways, and ports across Africa as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, a massive plan to create trade routes connecting China with Europe, Africa, and beyond. But perhaps most valuable of all are the relationships China is building. Every time China steps in with military equipment when Western countries step back, it gains goodwill from local governments. Every time China builds infrastructure without lecturing about democracy or human rights, it strengthens its image as a different kind of partner, one that respects African sovereignty. These relationships translate into votes at the United Nations, support for Chinese positions in international forums, and a growing global network of countries that see their future more aligned with Beijing than with traditional Western powers. But China's growing influence in the Sahel hasn't gone unchallenged. Other powers have their own interests in the region and their own strategies for maintaining influence. Russia has also been expanding its presence, often in ways that complement and sometimes compete with Chinese interests. When Mali's military government pushed French forces out in 2022, it didn't just turn to China for help. It also invited the Wagner Group, a Russian private military company with close ties to the Kremlin, to help fight terrorist groups. Hundreds of Russian mercenaries arrived, bringing with them combat experience from Syria, Libya, and Ukraine. Unlike China, which provides equipment but not fighters, the Wagner Group puts boots on the ground. Its mercenaries join Malian forces in combat operations against jihadist groups. This gives Russia a more direct role in shaping security in the region. But Russia's approach comes with costs. Wagner Group operations have been linked to human rights abuses in Mali and elsewhere. And unlike China's state-owned companies, which can take a long-term view, Wagner has faced pressure to show quick results and secure access to resources to pay for its operations. After the death of Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin in 2023, questions arose about the future of the group's African operations. Russia has moved to bring Wagner more directly under state control, suggesting that it still values these operations as part of its broader strategy in Africa. For China, Russia's presence in the Sahel presents both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, Russian and Chinese interests sometimes overlap. both want to reduce Western influence in Africa. Both benefit from good relations with governments that feel alienated from the West. And in many cases, they can divide responsibilities. Russia providing combat forces, while China supplies equipment and builds infrastructure. On the other hand, Russia's more aggressive approach and the controversies surrounding Wagner operations could complicate China's carefully cultivated image as a benign partner focused on development and mutual benefit. So how do China and Russia navigate their sometimes competing interests in the Sahel? And where does this leave the United States and other Western powers that have their own concerns about security in the region? The changes happening in the Sahel aren't just about China replacing France. They're part of a much bigger shift in how power works in our world. The United States, for example, has been very concerned about terrorism in the Sahel. It built a $400 million drone base in Niger to help track and target terrorist groups. After Niger's military takeover in 2023, relationships became strained. The US has had to reduce its operations there, but hasn't completely left. European countries beyond France also have interests in the region. Germany, Italy, and others have participated in military and development missions. The European Union has spent billions on aid programs. But like the US, these countries face challenges working with the new military governments. For the military rulers in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, this complex landscape offers both risks and opportunities. By playing different outside powers against each other, they can gain leverage and resources. If the West won't help us fight terrorists without political conditions, they effectively say, we'll turn to China and Russia instead. This strategy has worked to some extent. While formal Western aid has decreased, China has increased its support. Russian Wagner forces provide combat assistance that Western countries wouldn't offer without strict oversight. The military governments have managed to stay in power despite international pressure. But this balancing act carries dangers too. Relying too heavily on any one foreign power, whether China, Russia, or another, could lead to new forms of dependency. And the fundamental problems facing the Sahel, climate change, poverty, weak institutions, and violent extremism, can't be solved by switching from one foreign patron to another. So where does this leave the people of the Sahel, who have seen armies come and go, governments rise and fall, but whose daily struggles continue, regardless of who claims to be helping them? Underneath all the geopolitical chess moves, the people of the Sahel continue to face immense challenges. Over 6.5 million people have been displaced by violence in the central Sahel region. Thousands of schools have closed because of security threats. Hunger is a daily reality for millions. For many ordinary citizens, questions about whether China, Russia, France, or the US has more influence might seem academic compared to more immediate concerns. Will my children be safe walking to school? Can I farm my land without being attacked? Will there be enough rain this year for crops to grow? But the shifting alliances do affect everyday life. China's investments in infrastructure have created jobs and improved transportation in some areas. Roads built by Chinese companies help farmers get goods to market and make it easier for people to access healthcare. The military equipment China provides to local armed forces might help push back terrorist groups that have made life unbearable in many communities. If these weapons help establish security, children might return to school and displaced families to their homes. At the same time, there are legitimate questions about what China's growing influence means for governance, human rights, and the environment. Unlike Western donors, China doesn't push for democratic reforms or stronger environmental protections. This hands-off approach pleases many government officials, but concerns civil society groups working for change. Similar questions apply to Russia's role. Wagner mercenaries have helped Mali's government reclaim territory from jihadist groups, potentially making some areas safer for civilians. But human rights groups have documented serious abuses during these operations, including the massacre of hundreds of civilians in the town of Mora in 2022. For the average person in Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger, the ultimate question isn't which foreign power has more influence, but but whether any of them can help create conditions for peace, stability, and development. So far, decades of foreign involvement, whether French, American, Chinese, or Russian, haven't resolved the region's fundamental challenges. This raises profound questions about the future. Is there a model of international engagement that actually serves the people of the Sahel rather than outside interests? And what role should African countries themselves play in creating that model? China's expanding role in the Sahel isn't a temporary phenomenon. It's part of a long-term strategy to increase Chinese influence across Africa and beyond. So what might the future hold? In the short term, we're likely to see more Chinese military equipment flowing to Sahelian armies, more Chinese companies winning construction contracts, and more diplomatic engagement between Beijing and the capitals of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. China has appointed its first defense attaché to Niger, signaling its intention to deepen military ties. Chinese companies are looking for new opportunities in mining, agriculture, and infrastructure. The Belt and Road Initiative continues to expand across Africa, with the Sahel playing an increasingly important role. For African countries, China's growing role offers both opportunities and challenges. The competition between China, Russia, and Western powers gives African governments more options and potentially more leverage to pursue their own interests. But it also risks turning the Sahel into a battleground for influence, where local needs are secondary to geopolitical calculations. The story of China's growing influence in the Sahel is still being written. What began as a cautious economic presence has evolved into a multifaceted engagement that spans military cooperation, resource development, infrastructure construction, and diplomatic support. As France's long shadow recedes from the region, China has stepped forward, not with dramatic gestures or declarations, but with steady, pragmatic engagement that aligns with its global strategy of building influence through economic ties and political partnerships. If you felt something while watching this, pride, inspiration, hope, or maybe even a spark of possibility igniting within you, don't let that feeling fade away. Subscribe.
Hello, everyone. This time I stand before you with another success story from Burkina Faso. Not the story of politics, but the story of innovation, the story of technology revolution. And here is the story.
Once called one of the poorest nations in the world, Burkina Faso is now making headlines for something no one saw coming: innovation. Under the revolutionary leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this small West African country is quietly but powerfully building a tech revolution. From electric cars to military drones and now armored vehicles, Burkina Faso is doing what many believed only rich, developed nations could do. But this story is not just about machines. It's about vision, empowerment, and an African leader who chose to believe in his people. This is the story of how Burkina Faso is rising. This is a message to every African nation. Africa's greatness isn't in the past. It's happening now. In 2023, Burkina Faso unveiled its first locally produced electric car. Built by Burkinabe engineers using locally sourced materials, the vehicle sent a powerful message. Africa can create. This wasn't just a prototype. These vehicles were road-tested, efficient, and proudly made in West Africa. The symbolism couldn't be missed. A country under sanctions, struggling with security, still had the power to innovate. The global media took note. African youth were inspired. The message: innovation doesn't need foreign aid. It needs freedom, leadership, and belief. Just 1 year after making waves with electric cars, Burkina Faso shocked the world again. This time with locally produced armored vehicles and military drones. These machines are not toys. Designed for real combat, built with local expertise, and deployed for national defense, they represent a giant leap forward in African military technology. The armored vehicles were revealed in a government showcase, proudly bearing national flags. Military drones designed for surveillance and tactical use were confirmed by officials, further proof of the country's technical evolution. No longer is Burkina Faso just defending itself. It's building the tools to do so on its own terms. At the heart of all this innovation are the youth. Traoré didn't bring in foreign experts. He trusted Burkinabe engineers, inventors, and young creators. The government launched programs to fund innovation, support startups, and give local inventors platforms to showcase their work. In universities and garages across the country, young Africans are building drones, designing apps, and prototyping solar technologies. This is the vision of leadership that doesn't fear youth. It elevates them. Burkina Faso is not just changing itself. It's sending a message to the entire continent. Why wait for foreign aid? Why rely on imported technology? Why ignore the talents of our youth? What Traoré is doing is more than leadership. It's a blueprint. It challenges African governments to look inward, invest in their people, and build with what they have. The story of Burkina Faso could be the story of Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, or any African country, if leaders are willing to believe in their people. You might wonder, why haven't you seen this on CNN or BBC? While the world pays attention to conflict in Africa, it often ignores progress. That's by design. An Africa that builds its own vehicles, drones, and industries challenges global narratives of dependency. And that makes some uncomfortable. But silence won't stop progress. Burkina Faso is making history, whether the world watches or not. To African youth, your time is now. You don't need permission to build, to invent, to lead. To African leaders, support your people, fund innovation, create opportunity. Follow the example of Captain Traoré. And to every viewer, share this story. Because when one African nation rises, we all rise. Thank you for watching Make Africa Great. Subscribe for more powerful stories of African pride, progress, and potential. The revolution is real, and it's just beginning.
Wow, this is an inspiring story. Bravo, Burkina Faso, bravo, the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré for inspiring young people to become revolutionaries. This is a new wave of innovation that is rising from the heart of West Africa in Burkina Faso, where now you see young people have become not just innovators and creators, revolutionary. You see, every young people in his sector or a sector, you see, they're trying to revolutionize things. If it is in agriculture, you see those experts revolutionizing agriculture, education, the same, technology, the same, military, the same. So this is a total revolution in Burkina Faso, starting from military leadership, political issues, and now in science and technology. This is an inspiring story in our mother continent, Africa. So you can see, if leaders are doing well, people will start thinking more beyond with their nation. A few days ago, I shared the video of young Burkinabe on the streets paving their roads without being paid by anyone. They decided from their heart that we have responsibility to build our nation. And right now, you see, these young people have decided to innovate and create things, armor cars, you see, these drones, you can see, electric cars. It is because of the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. You know, if you give young people, Africans, opportunities to express and to show their talents, they will shock you. Africans, we have no shortage of talents. We have no shortage of innovators. We have no shortage of creators. The problem that we have is political instability. And that's why those who want to control us, they're not happy with stability in the continent of Africa. Because they know if Africa, we can be at peace for 5 years, this world will change. Things will happen in the continent of Africa. But because there are those who want to exploit us, there are those who don't want Africa to be at stable, That's why they're trying to manipulate us. I think this is a message to all of us, the people of Africa. Those who thought that Africans, we cannot innovate, it is only Chinese, it is Europeans. I think now they have been proven wrong that Africans, we can do better. Africans, we can innovate. Last month, I shared a video of Ethiopia. Right now, Ethiopia has succeeded to manufacturing ammunition. You see, Ethiopia now is manufacturing drones. You see, and this sent a message to all of us that things is possible. What we need as Africans is to come together to make sure that we have peace. Because these young people, instead of becoming innovators and thinking what they can do, they are busy fighting one another. And that's what's happening in the continent of Africa. We have intelligent people, but those intelligent people are busy fighting each other. That's why we have been calling for peace in this continent. And peace can be obtained if we young people, Africans in general, we can come together. And I'm concentrating on young people because young people are those who have been used in wars, in conflict, because our elders, old men and women are not going to fight on the streets. It's we young people who are being used by politicians. I think right now you can see why Captain Ibrahim Traore said his nation, Burkina Faso, is not a democratic country, is a revolutionary country. So things started to happen. So if we can declare our continent as a revolutionary continent, we can start seeing young people starting to revolutionize, whether in agriculture or in technology like this or in space. We want to see Africans going to space, discovered things on the sky there, on the space in different planets. It's not about Russians and the Americans who are supposed to go to the moon or to go to Mars and wherever in other planets. Even Africans, we need Africans to go there. We have that capacity and ability because Africans, we are intelligent. Go in all tech industries, you find Africans. You find Africans. Go in every sector, you find Africans. But Africans, we are in the continent, we are busy fighting each other. Let us stop that nonsense. Let us come together. Let us allow and give space to our young men and women to innovate. And through this, you can see that you create jobs. Because, for instance, in these car industries, you are going to create jobs to those who are going to manufacture tires. You are going to create jobs for technicians who will repair these cars. The same to drones. You are going to create jobs to those who will transfer these cars. These cars are not maybe moving on air. They need loads. So you are going to create jobs by constructing roads and bridges. So all those are just jobs. And these people who are working in industries, they need food. Farmers are going to farm because consumers are there. These people are sometimes they become injured. They need medicine. Doctors are going to work. So every sector, if you have industries, you touch every sector. And there's no need for we young people to die into Mediterranean seas or to die into Atlantic seas or wherever in the ocean, whether it is Mediterranean or Indian Ocean or in the desert. We have no reason for us to die while we are learning a way to seek green pasture somewhere else. A green pasture is here. Captain Ibrahim Traore has demonstrated, and the people of Burkina Faso has teaching us, the rest of the continent, that we can, we have capacity, and we must. Let us congratulate the people of Burkina Faso. I know many Africans are doing well, but we are taking Burkina Faso because it's a country that came from destabilization. We have these countries that are stable for more than 50 years. But what have we done? Look, countries such as Korea right now, they're selling to us these smartphones, they're selling us cars, they're selling us equipment, machinery. Why? Because they have decided to sit down, to support young people, to give opportunities to talents so that young people can start innovating and creating things. But here in Africa, instead of allowing people to become thinkers, to innovate, to create things, we are taking young people into war, into conflict, to fight, and to fight for headers. For politicians, these corrupt politicians who steal from us and keep money in Europe, in islands, and they take those money and give these young people, feed them drugs and pump them to fight. I think young people, we need to change. This is our continent. We need to build our continent. This is our nations. These are our nations. We need to collapse these borders and unite and build our nations. How is it possible the Chinese are doing that? Chinese now are here in the continent of Africa, not to develop the continent of Africa, are here to seek opportunities, to find resources, and to make businesses. But we Africans, we are busy fighting each other. This bad politics that we have is undermining our development. I think the time has come, dear family, friends, fellow Africans, to come together. There's no reason for us to die poor. There's no reason for us to die hunger. There's no reason for us to be beggars. We have everything. We need leadership. Let us demand quality and good leadership. It is not right that a country with more than 1 million people has no good leader. It doesn't make sense. We have many travelers in this continent, but the problem that we have, it is the system that is in place. So we need to collapse these systems. We need to collapse these systems. We need to make sure that we create good leaders like Traore, like many other, Nkrumah, Nyerere. We have so many leaders who are so intelligent and good in this continent. But the problem is politics. And these politics, as I said many times, these are Western politics. The politics of division. We have politics of division, politics of tribalism. We need to come to an end. So, family, friends, let us not speak for too long. The aim is to share this inspiring story from Burkina Faso. Every now and then, we'll continue to share good story because this is our time to write our own story. We'll write also a good story from many other places. We know in many countries things are happening, but
Three African nations just built their own banks, quietly, without asking the IMF, France, or anyone else. No news coverage, no outside funding, no approvals, just silence, and a bold new financial weapon. But what exactly did they create? And why is the West avoiding the conversation? Let's find out. Something monumental just happened in West Africa, in a low-key declaration that hardly made the news. At first glance, the establishment of a new financial organization by three landlocked nations appeared to be a straightforward regional endeavor. But if you look a little closer, you see that this wasn't your typical situation. This was the kind of breakaway that shakes the foundations of established systems. Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Mali, nations that are frequently reduced to statistics concerning insurgency, coups, and poverty, have just taken a risk. They established their own regional bank. The Confederal Bank for Investment and Development is the name of the organization. Don't be fooled by the bureaucratic nomenclature, though. This is not some innocuous government agency. This uprising is expressed in money, a bank with a single goal: to finance the future without meddling, supervision, or Western funds. It began with 500 billion CFA francs, or between 820 and 833 million. A substantial sum of money by any measure, but particularly for nations that were told they couldn't finance anything without outside assistance until recently. The money is no longer coming from Brussels, Washington, or Paris. It originates inside their respective economies, inside their reserves, inside their local networks. It's African currency intended for African growth. This bank's existence alone isn't what makes it so disruptive. It's the cause and the location of it. These are not Africa's economic superpowers. These nations are in the Sahel, countries caught in geopolitical turmoil, deserted by international allies, and subjected to sanctions. Nevertheless, they have accomplished something that experts claimed was impossible in spite of the pandemonium. They are taking charge of their economic future by subtly constructing the instruments of sovereignty rather than by demonstrating in public places. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was not ostentatious. No international dignitaries at the gala. Investors were not the target audience for the launch. It was not an aesthetic issue. It had to do with intent. This type of desire indicates that something more significant is happening. These nations are no longer in need of assistance. They're saying that they don't require it. And they're doing it with deeds rather than words. Three nations that were formerly a part of the Francophone West African economic system, linked to the French-backed CFA currency, and intricately involved in organizations such as ECOWAS and the West African Economic and Monetary Union, would be served by the Confederal Bank. However, since 2023, these same nations have begun to reorganize their relationships, expelled French soldiers, and withdrew from ECOWAS. As a result, when they claim to have constructed a bank, it's not just a bank. Rather, it's the last phase of their exit strategy, an indication that they won't be returning. This is when the narrative becomes even more disturbing. For everyone watching, not for them. This was more than a reaction to loneliness. The escalation was planned. Following economic pressure, political exclusion, and sanctions, these countries took an uncommon step in global politics. They ceased to respond and began to construct. They did not respond with diplomatic outrage or threats. In response, they produced something material that increases their independence, decreases their vulnerability, and makes them more difficult to manipulate. You must consider what this bank replaces in order to comprehend the scope of what is taking place. For many years, donor-backed initiatives run by non-governmental organizations and foreign contractors, as well as organizations like the World Bank and the African Growth Bank, have shaped the region's growth. These collaborations' fine language frequently required ceding authority, changing regulations, and agreeing to scrutiny by those in charge of the finances. That script is reversed by the Confederal Bank. It returns decision-making and funding to the local community. Furthermore, this move isn't symbolic. It is designed to finance actual projects, infrastructure, industrial growth, and agriculture, sectoral areas that the IMF is consistently too slow to support and too fast to politicize. You don't have to establish your creditworthiness to a Western economist who has never been to a Sahelian village when you work with this bank. No need to fulfill growth goals formulated in boardrooms abroad. The only prerequisite is that the initiative benefit the local community rather than international investors. The West's lack of response to this action says a lot. There is no media frenzy, no expert committees questioning how this would impact the stability of the region, and no outcry. It seems as though the only remaining tactic is to act as though it never happened. Because recognizing this bank is recognizing something far riskier than a simple financial transaction. It entails recognizing Africa's capacity to develop its own systems. That the three coup nations are capable of planning, coordinating, and taking the lead. Therefore, The Confederate Bank enters the scene quietly and defiantly rather than with much fanfare. It's not ostentatious. It doesn't want to make headlines. However, it is designed to endure and, more significantly, to expand. The question now is, why did they do this? You need to look beyond the numbers to see why Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger established this bank. Ambition was not the source of this. Exhaustion gave birth to it. Something finally broke after decades of waiting, cooperating, and conforming to development partners' expectations. Not in outrage or protest, but in clarity. These countries didn't decide to establish banks overnight. They came to a conclusion that few others have dared to express. There has always been a rig in the game. The Sahelian people were told for years that foreign help would bring them salvation. Every new government was supposed to shake hands with beaming diplomats who managed the aid flow, pursue reform packages, and demonstrate its allegiance to foreign financiers. It started to happen frequently. A tiresome, embarrassing ritual. Although leaders changed, the regulations remained same. Adhere, borrow, and act as though it's helpful. What did they receive in exchange? Airports that never got going, roads that didn't lead anywhere, initiatives that terminated quietly after ribbon cuttings. For the headlines, the appearance of development was sufficient, but not for the people. The reality is that a large portion of this aid was intended to maintain rather than end dependency, something that Western governments and international banks hardly ever acknowledge. They ceded their policy space in return for loans. They gave contracts to foreign companies in return for assistance. They saw their sovereignty erode in the name of cooperation. They were instructed to wait each time they requested agricultural investment. They were told it was too dangerous each time they suggested local industry. However, the money came in every time a multinational corporation sought access to its uranium, cotton, or gold. Mismanagement is not what that is. That system is operating precisely as intended. Additionally, these nations have had enough. For this reason, their decision to construct their bank was emotional as well as strategic. The goal was to restore the dignity that had been damaged by years of financial dependence. We're no longer asking. It was about conveying a message. They do not oppose progress. They are turning away from the developmental paradigm that initially caused their dependence. However, this uprising has a deeper dimension than just financial. The world rejected the Sahel States Alliance, AES, as a defensive pact when these three nations founded it in 2023. After being suspended from ECOWAS, they need something to stay afloat. However, desperation did not give rise to the AES. Alignment gave birth to it. Africa can no longer afford to be tactful about its pain. According to this political, cultural, and intellectual alignment. That is what binds Chiani, Guita, and Traoré together. They control narratives in addition to ruling nations. Narratives that defy filtering by donor-funded media outlets or Western folk groups. They have said unequivocally that their revolutions are psychological as much as military. Their goal is to convince their people that the days of constantly looking out are over, and that waiting is no longer necessary. Therefore, in the Western sense, this bank is not a financial entity. It resembles a machine that tells a counter-narrative. It rewires the concept of development. These leaders are deciding to demonstrate its value to their own people rather than to international investors. They're creating mechanisms that enable day-to-day living to go on without begging, rather than adjusting GDP to improve credit ratings. But don't get me wrong, this was more than simply internal annoyance. A trigger was present. The mask came off when France withdrew its troops, imposed sanctions, and stopped providing aid as a result of their refusal to adhere to democratic standards. These countries realized then that their friendship with the West was not unconditional, that the assistance ceased as soon as they disobeyed. And then something came up that altered everything. Were we ever genuinely sovereign if they could cut us off so easily? At that point, the bank's concept became a line in the sand rather than a side project. Additionally, this promise held true throughout time, in contrast to many other post-colonial ones that did not, because it was based on memories rather than ideology, the recollection of how their currencies were manipulated, their economy plundered, and their futures secured by beaming technical specialists and diplomats. They're remembering, not paranoid. They did, in fact, construct a bank. They actually constructed a wall, though, a barrier between their future and those in charge of it in the past. And that wall suddenly appears dangerous from the outside, since it is not to progress or peace, but to the whole system that ensured these countries never had the means to dream without authorization. They stopped dreaming under other people's roofs and constructed the bank. However, what would this bank do in reality? Thus, they constructed it as a guide for the future as much as a rejection of the past. It's hardly a vanity project, though. This is not a revolutionary monument. Money, materials, machinery, and brains are all intended to be moved by the Confederal Bank for investment and development. It's not here to make an impression. It is here to make the necessary repairs that no one else would. The West discussed infrastructure investment for years. However, there are still potholes and dusty roads connecting these three nations. The only thing that changed was the consultants and their findings, even though the World Bank would announce multi-million-dollar railway projects. The Confederal Bank is now filling the void left by broken promises. What's its top priority? Rewiring the bones of the area. We are referring to rail lines that link the uranium hubs in Nigeria with the industries in Mali, and then to the distribution centers in Burkina Faso. Nor to ports for export, nor to Europe, but to one another. For that is the distinction. This has nothing to do with exporting raw commodities to make money abroad. The goal is to create internal networks that support local labor and industry. The only viable routes for many years were those that led resources out of Africa. The goal of the Confederal Bank is to reverse the trend, to connect miners to refiners, farmers to processors, and goods to local markets. It's the liberation logistics. However, steel won't be enough to drive this change. Energy will be the future battlefield. The Confederal Bank is supporting a different future in an area dominated by imported gasoline prices and ravaged by blackouts. Energy grids that are locally maintained, decentralized, and renewable. The strategy? Large-scale solar farm investments, particularly in areas with the highest levels of energy poverty and sunshine. These mega projects are not foreign-built and do not need IMF oversight. Residents of the area are funding these community-powered microgrids. Because schools remain open as long as the lights remain on. Refrigerators are operated by clinics. Local companies no longer rely on diesel. Development suddenly becomes a reality. However, energy is just one component of the chain. The other is food. The Confederal Bank is getting ready to make a significant foray into the food processing and agricultural industries. Through national distribution centers, village-owned companies, and local cooperatives rather than international agribusinesses. In its simplicity, the objective is radical. Eat what they grow and grow what they eat. These nations have depended on imported wheat, rice, and processed commodities for far too long, even though they had more than enough soil to flourish. Why? Because funding for food self-sufficiency was discouraged by the aid system. Importing was usually less expensive, not because the land was unproductive, but rather because local farmers were left with mush-eats and droughts while foreign food came with subsidies. That formula is being reversed by the Confederal Bank. Farmers now have access to the full chain: equipment, irrigation, storage, and processing. They now purchase tomato paste in cans from Europe instead of selling tomatoes for pennies. It's not charity. Agricultural sovereignty is this. Additionally, it is being constructed one hamlet, one tool, and one crop at a time. it is more profound. Because movement isn't the only aspect of integration. It has to do with trust. Furthermore, money has never trusted the frontiers of Africa. For this reason, the bank is creating digital platforms and interoperable payment systems that let people and companies send and receive money and carry out cross-border transactions without the need for euros or dollars. No more depending on the French-backed CFA system. No more exorbitant costs for merely sending money to Niger from Mali. Unrestricted by colonial currency systems, the Confederal Bank is paving the way for genuine trade. Let's be clear too. Idealists do not operate this bank. Those who run it are strategists. Every loan, project, and investment will be made with consideration for national interests, long-term return, and risk management. They have observed debt traps. The fine print has been read by them. They have also discovered that free money is typically accompanied by unseen handcuffs. This time, they're establishing the conditions because of this. No, they have no billions, not quite yet. They do, however, have intent. Astute, well-organized, and independently funded. The goal of every dollar invested is to address the kinds of issues that no foreign partner has ever given priority to. Because you drive in various directions while your hands are on the wheel. Catching up to the West is not the goal here. The goal is to construct what the West never meant to provide. You could view financial statements, project budgets, capital reserves, and numbers at the Confederal Bank. But only if you have an economist's mindset. You'll notice that it's not constructed like a bank at all if you take another look. It is constructed like a spine, a network, and a fortress. Because there is a much more ambitious goal hidden under the paperwork and loan programs: unification. For a reason not merely financial gain, about politics, of the policy, of individuals. Development isn't the only factor here. The goal is to bind 3 countries to a common future that can never be broken by an outsider. Africa's history has been one of disunity for many years. Created disunity. In order to guarantee one thing, the boundaries, languages, currencies, and even time zones were determined. Fragmentation. Railroads are not shared by nations that share waterways. Foreign languages are traded by nations that speak the same language. It is common for neighbors who ought to work together to be obligated to different donors, to different creditors, and to separate agendas. It wasn't an error, it was a design. One that kept West African countries reliant on one another's vulnerability, as well as on outside funding. That wall is being blown through by the Confederal Bank. Through genuine investment, rather than treaties or talk shops. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are joining their economies and securing their futures together. Concrete fiber optic connections, collaborative ventures, and independent digital systems, not a handshake. This bank lends to more than just nations. It provides funding to a bloc. And that counts. Because you are no longer in 3 vulnerable states after your development plans, energy grids, transportation systems, and food networks are all in alignment. You are a single, well-coordinated unit. The Confederal Bank serves as the financial engine of the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES, which operates on that fundamental tenet. Statements become infrastructure because of it. What makes vision into roads? What transforms the concept of ownness into a reality that exists on shipping manifests, spreadsheets, and the everyday commerce between formerly unfriendly communities? In fact, put the bank aside for a moment if you want to truly grasp the gravity of this situation. Observe what it is substituting. Regional integration used to imply ECOWAS. It appeared to be a powerful West African bloc on paper. In reality, it was paralyzed, centered on a colonial currency that was still based on the euro, dominated by bigger countries like Nigeria, and in line with Western policy. Smaller nations had to plead with ECOWAS for flexibility for years, and in exchange, they received bureaucracy. However, ECOWAS did not behave as a brotherhood when the Sahelian military administrations began to make decisions that the West disapproved of, such as kicking out foreign soldiers, rejecting unfair contracts, and exposing hypocrisy. It behaved like a police officer. Suspensions, prohibitions, closed boundaries, separation. Therefore, they weren't abandoning unity when the Sahel split out and established the AES. They were giving it a new meaning. Integration was not something they were opposing. It was being constructed on new terms. Furthermore, the AES is now more than just a political alliance because of the Confederal Bank at its center. It's a functional device, one that already has shared economic regulations, a budget, and a currency strategy in place. They are creating agreements for customs. They are creating collaborative procurement initiatives. A common market for essential commodities and services is what they are suggesting. All supported, organized, and carried out by the bank. This is where it becomes even more potent. Because unity is more than simply a tactic. It serves as a shield as well. These nations were vulnerable on their own. To overthrow. To penalties. To sabotage the economy. Together, however, they are far more difficult to influence. Much more difficult to separate. No more isolated failure spots. No more using the vulnerability of one country to undermine the others. Mali took over when Burkina Faso was cut off from aid. Alternative trading avenues were provided by its AES partners, while Niger was subject to sanctions. Additionally, they no longer have to defend themselves to uncooperative lenders thanks to a regional bank. Every time a Western organization modifies its governance standards, they are not required to restructure their economy. A closed loop has been established by them. One of self-determination, not of secrecy. And the entrance is the bank. You must abide by the AES's regulations if you wish to access opportunities, capital, and markets within this bloc. Not in Washington. Not in Paris. Brussels, no. The roles are reversed. African countries are establishing the framework for the first time, and other countries will have to choose whether to join on their terms. It's more than just a change in policy. That's a postural shift. The Confederal Bank is more than just a financial organization because of this. It serves as a political tool. Africa now has a fresh tool for assertion rather than reaction. For creating reality rather than merely reacting to it. And it's already raising concerns outside of the Sahel. When Guinea requests to join the AES, what happens? When does Chad ask the Confederal Bank for funding? When a minor alliance accomplishes something that the AU hasn't been able to do for decades, this is no longer a local experiment. It is a prototype for a continent. It's also effective. Do you believe that anyone can now prevent African countries from achieving full independence? Do you still think that Africa is in need of assistance? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich
together with the job. The man who's a writer and an activist and really a just an actual absolute standard bearer in act. Ajamu, welcome to back to my humble channel.
I'm so glad to be back. As I was saying before we came on air, I miss you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm gonna have Margaret Kimberly, the wonderful Margaret Kimberly. She'll be on tomorrow. So my Black Agenda report and friends and at any rate, let's get started here. This is on my mind. I definitely want to start here. I really haven't had a lot of people want to discuss this issue, and I do want to start with this. Ibrahim Traore. You know, one of the things that I brought up, and I'll, throw it out to you. You know, I had a couple people push back from my WPFW show, my Pacifica show, because, we've got this Black General Michael Langley. They bring him before the Senate, and he does the old, yes, of all things for him to say this. Yes, the Burkina Faso people are using their gold for security for Ibrahim Traore instead of the people. And I'm thinking, well, he better have security because you're trying to kill him, right? But even the idea, when you look at the history of colonialism, going into countries, killing people to steal specifically their gold and silver and resources, that this person would do that. And what we hear is this: we've got 5 Black senators, however many it is, apparently 0. They're sitting in a room saying nothing. And the empire uses these people to go after. To me, this guy is like the Lion of Africa to me. He's, I get the spirit of Lumumba and Sankara and Nkrumah when I, finally I get that feeling when I see this man standing up, as proud as he is standing up for change in Burkina Faso. Your thoughts on all of that, John?
Well, I mean, look, this is an important topic to discuss because, as you said, Traore has become a symbol in a sense. He represents the aspirations that many people have for a united African continent, a continent that can be equal on the planet in terms of being able to comment on things that impact all of us, impact collective humanity. But as long as Africa is balkanized in the way that it is, then it remains dependent. And so there is a yearning among African people on the continent and throughout the Africa diaspora for us to reverse the trajectory of politics that have consolidated the division among African people and move us toward a new kind of politics that can lead toward consolidation. And so this alliance of Sahel states is important. His symbolic leadership is important. And because of that, many people are concerned about his security. We all know what happened with Brother Thomas Sankara. And we know that the way imperialism strikes is they strike early. And so there's real concerns about his safety. But he's not afraid. And we can't be timid in terms of voicing our support for this brother, for his state, and for the process that they are trying to undertake. It's a very difficult one, especially when you have to do this sort of from the top down in terms of the military taking power and building systematically civilian structures that can ensure that the process continues going in a positive and progressive direction.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen was that, there are other powers. I think Russia has sent in some other countries have sent in some people to help with his. So I've been reading, looking in, of course, the mainstream news in the U.S. to see what the empire is saying, right? And a couple of things. Russia is sending in people to protect him, and I'm thinking, well, that's good, but that's supposed to be bad, right? And also, this is important, and which takes me into something. The Burkina Faso people in the U.S. empire, they literally put it like this: the troops from the Burkina Faso, his soldiers are killing civilians, and the way they put it, these Al Qaeda terrorists are fighting his troops like they're protecting, like the Al Qaeda people or ISIS are literally protecting the civilians, and that his troops are actually killing civilians when it's the other way around. And this is the way I want to add that to. At a time when the president of the United States is shaking hands with an ISIS terrorist who has a $10 million or something like that, 10 million or more on his head, who is wanted all over the world.
Hypocrites. Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's hypocrisy. It demonstrates that this word terrorism and coming from officials in the West has no meaning, especially when you look at the activities of their intelligence agencies, when you look at the activities of the various states who are involved in systematic state terrorism. So this becomes just an instrument to confuse, and to divide, and to deflect, and divert attention away from the agenda that these forces continue to pursue. So you're right. Here you have Trump shaking the hands of someone who was the deputy in charge, ISIS, who has now assumed power in Syria, demonstrating the successful conclusion of a regime change process that started almost a decade or so ago, that has now resulted in the very thing that many of us argued was going to happen. And that is a right-wing jihadist government in place that would engage in systematic brutality against the Alawites and the Druze and the I mean, that's happening here. But yet now they have the blessings of the West, sanctions now being lifted, and Syria is being reincorporated into the communities of nations, or so I say, Western nations. And all of us who were raising these issues, arguing that this was undermining the sovereignty of their nation, undermining the objective interests of the secular Syrian people, we were called Assadists and everything under the sun. Okay, and these are from so-called progressives and so-called leftists. So this is the nature of the politics we have to deal with today. That's why we don't put any kind of value on these kinds of labels that the West and Western nations will impose on people, and we certainly don't give any attention to this framing of certain questions as though these people represent some kind of superior moral position. How do you talk about democracy when you're celebrating and supporting these anti-democratic forces around the world? So this is the issue from Burkina Faso to any other place around the world where you find that the West, and in particular the U.S., has put certain nations in their crosshairs. And we've got to be clear about what the real terms of these struggles really are. If not, we'll be confused. We'll see situations like what you described earlier, where you have a U.S. general who is openly talking about the need for subverting a African state with Black senators in the room, and nobody says a mumbling word about the history of U.S. subversion, U.S. destabilization, U.S. assassinations on the African continent, and U.S. coups. But this is the nature of the kind of neo-colonial leadership that they're also pushing around the world.
Well, and I got to add this, and we see the same thing in Syria. Who was it that opened the door to this ISIS criminal running Syria right now? Barack Obama. They stuck a black face out there and said, okay, we're going to take out Muammar Gaddafi, and we're going to make up lies about that the wealthiest African country in the world at that time, they used a black president, a black face, so they could take that out. They used Barack Obama so they could go after Libya. And now, thanks to Barack Obama, we see the fighting going on right now in Libya. Terror, just a terror place, which they want to.
But they've been doing that. We just ain't been paying attention. They had a black face to promote the Iraq war, Colin Powell. It went on a black man. So these destructive wars have been put on a black man. Fast forward to Ukraine war. Barack started that. And Susan Rice, his people who was talking at the UN, they were black. Fast forward to Joe Biden. His people who was promoting that war at the UN, instead of promoting Israel and promoting Ukraine, it was a black lady. The generals were black generals who steady promoting war. These people are very crafty at what they've been doing. They have been, because it's on the record now. All those shoe shiners, I don't want to hear a word from them. History will say the black man was right going along with all the murder and mayhem and terrorism that the United States was doing, and they done made sure of that.
Want to keep it that way. They do not want Libya to stabilize. And now they're deliberately turning Syria into Libya. And the same way they used Michael Langley to go after Burkina Faso to destabilize Africa, Barack Obama was the one that we can thank for this.
That's been the genius of the colonialists from the West, the ability to find natives who will cooperate with them.
That's a fact.
And that is, you are absolutely correct. The Obama administration was one of the most aggressive, militaristic presidencies in the entire post-war period. And people have to be reminded of that because you're right. There are things that the U.S. probably could not have been successful at on the African continent and other parts of the world, but are having this empty suit, this front person for U.S. imperialism, fronting for their interests. The military assault, the vicious military assault, was something that people need to understand is parameters. Think about this. We know that over 50,000 people have now been murdered in Gaza over the last 18 months or so. Okay, it's estimated that in those 4 months of intensive bombings and in the process of overthrowing the Libyan government, it's estimated that between 30 and 50,000 people lost their lives. And the 50,000 mark is relatively, some people say, still too little. So it was even more intense, more vicious than what we see in Gaza. The difference is this, Garland. With Gaza, we have a live stream genocide. We saw the images that were kept away from us in other conflicts. In Libya, we didn't see those images, except we saw images of the so-called freedom fighters. So the true brutality of that assault to destroy Libya, and in effect to destroy the process toward African liberation, was not brought to the consciousness of the people in the U.S. and the global consciousness, and so they were able to get away with that. So this is what they do. Beyond Libya, the subversion that started in Syria, and this was a regime, a government, if you will, that has a number of successes for U.S. imperialism. Not only Syria and Libya, but the coup in Egypt, the war that they waged in Yemen. This was a vicious, aggressive administration, but one that had the full support of many people in the U.S., including for the first time in the history of Black people, support of Black people giving their full support to these kinds of imperialist adventures. Up until Barack Obama, we've always been suspicious and always been in opposition to these kinds of activities on the part of the U.S. settler colonial state. But what we see is that Obama represented the end result of a 50-year counter-revolutionary process within the Black communities and against Black people. And so there's been a significant shift in consciousness, and people identify themselves as quote-unquote Americans, and wrapping themselves in the flag, and indeed wrapping themselves in the criminality of this settler colonial state and empire.
Well, and I'll say this, I believe that, and people get mad at me, that when the success they had of using Obama to pursue their imperial machinations, right? I believe that was kind of the woke culture thing started, because they started saying, well, wait a minute, we can do all kind of devious and evil deeds, right? But we'll just simply say, like right now, Southcom. Who's in charge of Southcom? The Southern Command, which is all over South America doing all kind of devious deeds. They have a woman in charge, right? I think they started realizing that what we need to do is we need to mask this imperialism, mask this bombing, violence, and all that. We'll put a woman, we'll put a gay person, we'll put a black person, a Latino, we'll put somebody there, and then we can claim, look at the good we're doing. You know, I can't stand Hollywood. Can't stand it. And let me tell you why. Every single thing I turn on, there's one black person, one white person, one gay person, one Latino person, one there, right? This virtue signaling, right? No place supports the genocide in Gaza. There's no place you can go more so than Hollywood and find support for the genocide in Gaza. But it's the same thing as Obama. They put forward this veneer of justice. We're standing up. Look at that. We've got all the minorities. We got all the women, gay, everybody here, but yet you're standing for the slaughter and the literal starvation of men, women, and children. But I'm supposed to think you're good because you have one, because everything looks like a Benetton ad. It makes me sick to watch it.
Well, and that's part of the cultural war that's being waged against people in the United States and really globally. That to legitimize the viciousness, legitimize the assaults on oppressed people and people who are fighting for their national liberation, to give the impression that they're on the right side of history, that is the Western states. And it's a little bit easier to do that when you have people who look like the same people you are murdering, who are articulating the agenda and the program of the imperialists. But that's going to come to an end, Garland, because one of the consequences of the Trump administration is that basically, this commitment to diversity and inclusion and equity, objectively principles that could be embraced. It's time out for that now, because basically what is being embraced now is a renormalization of white supremacy, and that is a very dangerous phenomenon also. But those of us who are people of conscience, we are consistently trying to help people to understand it's not about the color of your skin, your race, ethnicity, or whatever. It's about what kinds of principles and values do you have? How do you see a collective humanity? What kind of vision do you have for the future? Can you embrace systems and programs that delegitimize and degrade other human beings? Do you support politics that create a hierarchy among human beings, where some people are exploited and other people benefit from that? We have to have a different ethical system and say that our politics has to reflect that commitment, a real commitment to authentic universalism, one in which we are grounded in a vision of humanity in which we see the common and equal value of all human beings. That is a radical perspective, and that is a perspective that the people who push out imperialist policies and colonial policies don't want to see being embraced by the vast majority of the people on this planet.
I agree with you. Oftentimes people will call in my show in Pacifica and ask me about, the solutions, this and that. And one guy always calls me, I think the Black people need their own political party or this or that. And they always ask me, and I say, this is me. I understand there's different groups, and that various groups have various particular needs as a member of that group, right? Okay. I see politics through the lens of economic class. I believe the working class needs to come together, because there's an old saying about a bayonet in a war. There's a working man on either side of it, right? He's getting stuck with it and he's carrying it. And I think that when you look at what's going on, Trump's over there, right? But really, what is he doing in Saudi Arabia? For all the talk of this, he signed a deal for like $800 billion. When it comes down to it, right? There's some $400 million plane and all this kind of stuff. When it comes down to it, why do they want Burkina Faso? Because they like the land or whatever? No, because it's got gold. It's got, you know what I mean? When it comes down to the ruling elite, it's always about the appropriations of other people's funds and natural resources. And if you look at Gaza, to me, if you look at Palestine, occupied Palestine, there's value to the land. that ultimately, when it comes down to it, to me, it's settler colonialism. You know what I mean? It's not even about a religion. It's settler colonialism first and foremost, under the veneer of, oh, we've got to, you know, God gave this to the Jews 2,000 years ago, or whatever the case may be. But to me, it's all about colonialism. Your thoughts?
Well, in so-called Israel, it is a settler colonial project. It is a settler colonial project that's structured now on the basis of apartheid, and structured on the basis of denying the humanity, the physical existence of Palestinians. It is a project very similar to the project that evolved in the United States of America. And that's why I think there's such an affinity between the two, because it is a settler colonial process. And we know that of all the forms of colonialism, the most vicious was and is settler colonialism, because what is the objective is to control the land, and the people on the land become just an impediment for your full domination. If you don't need those people to provide cheap labor, then the formula for genocide exists. And that's what we saw that happen in the U.S. Once the target was the land, they didn't need the native people to work the land, because they're bringing in Africans to provide the free labor. Same thing with what's unfolding in the desire to create a greater Israel. That basically they're not concerned about the people occupying the land; they want the land, and therefore we see this genocidal program unfolding in Gaza, and we see how they're moving to annex the West Bank. So yes, having that understanding of these objective interests is really, really important, and that will help us to avoid the kinds of divisions that the enemy will create, suggesting that some people should identify with these processes, or to remain silent in order to get paid themselves. So you have a situation, for example, you have some people who are confused and say that, who are Black, who say, "Oh, what's happening in Gaza has nothing to do with us." That our response to that is, you must be mad. If they can degrade and dehumanize and justify the genocidal policies in Gaza, what in the world do you think they can do for you or to you? Okay. Not only that, we're human beings. Aren't the Palestinians human? Do we want to embrace a framework that suggests that there's a hierarchy of humanity, and that some people are deserve to be to have their families bombed and their hospitals destroyed and their roles eliminated, and to be starved and to death and to be burnt? What kind of world do you want to live in? You are a human being. Therefore, what they are doing to Palestine, they're doing to all of us, and they're doing this in your name. So you have a moral responsibility. Either you oppose it, or you are in collusion with it. So, but that is a new, I would argue, Gardner, that's a new attitude among Black folks. We have never been that morally corrupt before. But again, this is a consequence of what I call the Americanization of the Black person in the U.S., incorporating and assimilating these kinds of backward, anti-human kinds of cultural notions. And so therefore you have, movement in the U.S., a movement opposed to the genocide, primarily led by Jewish Americans, with the white Americans, Black folks, and everybody else of color who are part of opposing these policies. Because again, if you don't oppose them, then basically you are in collusion with them. You are morally condemned. And when they write this segment of human history at this moment in 2025, you want to be able to know that you're on the right side. You want to be able to tell your grandkids, if you have them, or sons and daughters or whatever, that you oppose this madness. You're not going to be like the Germans that were silent during the years of the rise of the Nazis. You want to be on the right side of history. And that is why many of us are willing to step out there and to be absolutely clear in our opposition to what's unfolding in Gaza, what's unfolding in Syria, what is the madness we see now in Libya, and we in the the normalization of domination that we see throughout the world, including Biden's war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, one of the things I think that was an interesting time for me was watching those 3 months before the election. And you and I really haven't sat down and discussed that since. And that was this again. It goes back to Obama, Michael Langley. What did they do? Oh, this time we've got a black, which supposedly, allegedly black. She said she was Indian, and then all of a sudden she turned black when she started running for office. But and that's something that I have gone around in circles with a lot of black people about. Well, you've got to vote for her because vote for Jill Stein and Butch Ware. Well, they go to win. I said I'm voting for them because of Gaza. I don't want to hear about it. And to me, to get people to support the Democrats was bad enough. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't supporting them anyway. But in the midst of a genocide, they're literally committing a genocide in front of your face. And the best they can say is we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire. And we found out that was a lie. I didn't have to find out it was a lie. I already knew it. But that to me was it was a terrible thing to do. To Black Americans, to say to people, Americans, period, all members of the Democratic Party, to say to them, you have to ignore the fact that we're committing a genocide because Trump might get it. Well, what is he going to do that's worse than a genocide? He's going to carry on whatever you've been doing. That's what he did last time. He was in for 4 years. He didn't do that much different than me. He carried on a little more openly what the Democrats were doing. But that whole concept of running for office, sticking this fool out there, claiming she's a black woman, and then trying to get people to ignore a genocide. And, sadly, many people did out of fear. Your thoughts?
I mean, the real development among black people that we wish we were at would be that even if she was black, that she would not receive our votes because of her policies, specifically because of her support for militarism and the genocide in Gaza. It shouldn't matter if someone's black, white, or whatever. You cannot give your vote to a candidate, to a party, to a system that is committing a racist rampage, a genocide in Gaza. You can't do that. If you do it, then you are corrupting yourself morally. And so that is the kind of politics we have to see develop in the United States of America. This notion that Kamala Harris was bringing back the joy and all this kind of crap. Where's the joy when people are dying every day in Gaza? It was a supreme expression of selfishness for people to suggest that we had to support Kamala Harris in order to forestall the continuation of the consolidation of fascism in the U.S. My position on that was that's immoral, because basically not only are you not not only you're not forestalling fascism, because we already have fascism, and the driving force of it has always been the neoliberal Democrats, but you are suggesting that you will support a fascist in the United States, and in order to ensure that there will be fascism and a genocide taking place in Gaza. What does that suggest? So basically, this is the kind of immoral politics that have now become normalized in the U.S. And we have to reject that, because basically, we are providing the foundation for all kinds of horrific things that happen to not only us, but everybody else. The fact that it was the Biden administration and the liberal Democrats that supported the attacks on their own children at these elite colleges and universities, that provided the foundation for Trump to take it to the next level. And they began to put foreign students in jail, to send people out of the country, to suggest to people that they needed to voluntarily deport themselves, basically, to put a chill on all opposition to this slaughter of human beings in Gaza. And the Democrats have no moral footing to oppose what's happening, because they provided the foundation. The same thing with the war in Ukraine. The same thing, as you pointed out, with the war in Syria. That it is a bipartisan ruling class agenda is being supported by this system that either you buy into and support or you oppose.
I agree. I certainly agree. There's no room for sitting on the fence here. I did want to ask you about Iran. You know, I was recently on Press TV, and they, you know, asked me my thoughts, and I said, you know, the obvious, and that is, you know, you had a deal with the U.S. in the past. The United States never even kept their deal from the beginning. The day they signed that deal, they were supposed to drop sanctions. They never dropped sanctions. Then Donald Trump comes in and he followed up and just said, we're dropping out of the deal. And now they're saying, well, we want a deal. I said, in my opinion, any deal that Iran says their position should be, you have to first execute your part of the deal if you want us to execute anything. But how do you get a deal with the devil? That, you know, my point. But your thoughts on the Iranian people, the Iranians, their position, you know, the up to me, and I'll say this: I have a lot of respect for the Shia people, the Iranians. Yemen, they stood up and kicked a few aircraft carriers out of the Red Sea. That's something that I think people around the world should be proud of. But your thoughts? I understand you've recently had some engagements with the Iranians.
Well, I just returned from Iran about a week or so ago. I had a chance to participate in the third international media festival, bringing together people who are involved in the alternative media globally. I was a judge there at that festival. I had a chance again to talk with many Iranians, including just ordinary people. And one thing, Garland, is quite clear. The people of Iran, they just want to be able to pursue their process in peace. They want to live in peace. They want to maintain their sovereignty. They want to be able to make decisions in terms of how they produce themselves, how to reproduce themselves socially, what kind of economy they are building, who they will relate to on the international stage. They want the same kinds of freedoms that theoretically we're supposed to have in the U.S. But yet, because of the decades-long adamance that the U.S. authorities have had toward Iran, they have found themselves in the crosshairs for more than 40 years. They just want peace. And so there's some hope in the current discussions, but the people are not naive also, for the reasons you just laid out. Here you have this joint comprehensive program of action that was in some ways a very intrusive agreement in terms of Iranian sovereignty, where they agreed to have this daily inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, cameras throughout their nuclear facilities, and to voluntarily hold the enrichment of uranium to 3.67%. This is all part of their commitment to a energy mix like other nations are involved in to satisfy their energy needs in their country. So nuclear power is part of that mix. Everything was in place. So as you said, it was abrogated by the United States of America. From the very beginning, they were reluctant to live up to their side of the bargain in terms of completely eliminating all of the sanctions. And then finally, the Trump administration basically said, let's quit playing with this and just eliminate it. And so that's what happened. Now there's this new so-called indirect conversations. But the question has to be this: what is the basis of the conversation? If you had an agreement in which you had intrusive monitoring, when you had and all of the evidence suggests, including the U.S. intelligence agencies, have said that there was no evidence to suggest there was any deviation from the agreement. That was also verified again by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that there was no deviation of uranium to weapons program, et cetera, et cetera. It was clean. So what is there to talk about now? What is the basis? You go back to that as a foundation, those agreements, And what was the issue that caused the Trump administration to eliminate or to abrogate the agreement? Well, what they did was they were concerned about Iranian politics and other military capabilities, including their ballistic missile systems. The Iranians understanding the region, understanding the objective agenda of Israel, the Israeli fascist regime, that if they didn't have the capability, the ability to protect themselves, to defend themselves, then they would be open to the constant aggression that other nations, other states have experienced in the region. I mean, look, before they finally overthrew the government in Syria, the Israelis were able to invade their airspace at will. Okay, they will have loved to put the Iranians in the same position. The Bashar al-Assad could not retaliate when they were attacked by the Israelis, but the Iranians could. So they were concerned about, they wanted to undermine the ability of the Iranians to defend themselves. Well, the Trump administration says today that, okay, we're not going to talk about ballistic missiles. The focus is only on the nuclear program. Well, then again, I raised the question to talk about what aspect. You want to go back to the original agreement? Okay, that could be a basis. But if you're not talking about that, what in fact are you talking about? And this is what I think they're talking about, Garland. They're setting up the scenario for the possibility, real possibility of a military assault. They want the talks to collapse. When the Trump administration, when Trump says that Iran has to dismantle its nuclear program, what is that? What kind of look? They couldn't even agree to that. My reading of what's happening in Iran is that the Iranian authorities, the current president, the prime minister, there's no way they can sell that kind of agreement to the Iranian people. The Iranian people are proud people, and they had to suck it up a lot with the first agreement. And now you're going to come back and say you're going to dismantle your program because these people 8,000 miles away say that you should. No, it's not going to happen. So it is a very worrying situation, Garland, because on one hand, you have many people who believe that something can be worked out, there can be some kind of agreement. On the other hand, you have people who don't believe that this is an authentic attempt to try to resolve the differences. I tend to fall on the side of
point just looking at Gaza alone, when you understand the brutality and the brutal nature and the vicious nature of the ruling elite of the U.S., the only thing they understand is force. The positive thing for Iran is that they understand that, and they have developed a defensive capability strong enough to deter the U.S. empire. So I think that if anything stops the imperialists from attacking Iran, it will be Iran's ability to deter them and to strike back, because that's the only thing they really understand. Because if you make a deal with them, I mean, Iran has to look over at Libya, and they said, Libya, get rid of your nuclear program. They got rid of their nuclear program. They attacked them. Syria, get rid of your chemical weapons. They got rid of their chemical weapons. They attacked them. But look at North Korea. North Korea developed their if we are honest about it, the reason that North Korea is standing today and still able to be an independent and sovereign nation, and they're aligning with China and Russia and BRICS and etc., is because they have a nuclear weapons program. Now, I'm not saying that Iran should, because they have made a decision based on their morals that they don't want one. But they have developed the capability to adequately defend themselves. And to me, that's the only thing that the imperialists understand. And Ibrahim Traore right now, if it wasn't for the fact that there are people from other countries and other people coming in from around Africa, I understand there's people in the street saying we'll defend him with our lives. The physical defense of him is the only thing that keeps him going. And I think that's the state, to me, it's very positive for me to look at Iran and see them have their missile. I'm happy to see Iran's missile defense and air defense and increase their abilities to defend themselves, because I know they're not an offensive power. But without that defensive capability, the U.S. empire would jump on them without a second thought.
All nations have the right and indeed the responsibility to be able to defend their nation and their state. And so the Iranians assert that right. You know, the fact of the matter is that, as you said, the threats, the bullying going to directed toward North Korea has stopped, because they have the capability to be able to defend themselves. Some people argue that the same thing would happen if the Iranians had the capabilities to defend themselves ultimately. But as you said, and the U.S. intelligence has borne this out, there appears to be no commitment to developing a nuclear weapon at this point. Now, the Israelis are trying to pretend like they have found a new nuclear site in Iran. This, of course, happens right after they, the U.S. enters into these conversations. We hear about some plot that was uncovered supposedly in London by these crazy Iranians who are going to attack the Israeli embassy. These are all public relations stunts to continue the structuring of perceptions of Iran as this wild and crazy nation. And what's extraordinary about that, Garland, is this: here we have these kinds of efforts to try to frame the Iranians as irresponsible by Western nations that are supporting a wild and crazy maniac, lunatic government in Israel that's engaged in a systematic slaughter of human beings in Gaza. We're also supposed to believe that having nuclear weapons in the control of a Benjamin Netanyahu and those crazed right-wingers in Israel is supposed to make us safe. That these people represent stable human beings. Who in their right mind really believes that? The people in the global south certainly don't do that. They see the nature of that regime. And they now see the nature of the regime that is the enabler of those kind of politics in Israel and in Gaza. And that is the United States of America. So, what are they talking about then in these negotiations? Well, they're setting up again a scenario to carry out the only thing that they seem to be good at, that is the West, and that is waging war. But the Iranian people, while they want peace, they seem to be prepared for the real possibility that might not arrive. The question becomes, for those of us in the West, what do we do? Where are our voices? Where is our commitment to international peace? How do we defend the international order when it's quite clear that the international order is being undermined by these outlaw states, primarily by the U.S. and Israel? What happened to international law? How is it that you're going to have two people from Israel indicted as war criminals, but yet they can move around the world with impunity? How do you explain the fact that we are watching 2.3 million people being starved without any kind of response? That where are the sanctions on Israel? Where the movements to ensure that they don't participate in the Olympics or the World Cup? Where is their political and cultural isolation? This is absolute madness. But what it does, it exposes, it strips away the veneer of civilization for the West. And we are now able to peer into the abyss, peer into the rotten guts of what this thing called Western civilization really is. And it's not a very pretty sight. But the good thing about this is that for all of us in global humanity, we are growing up. No longer can any Western official with any credibility can allow two words to flow from their mouths: democracy, I guess it's two more words, and human rights, because they are the they are the forces that are the most effective in undermining any kind of real commitment to those two terms.
Yeah, I'm 100% aligned with what you said. We got 15 minutes left. I did want to touch base, since I know I didn't put it in there, but one of the things that it's sadly in America, one of the issues which is very close to home that isn't discussed is Haiti. The Biden administration, for all of that, oh, we're standing up for minorities. Oh, look, we've got candidates of color and this and that and all that stuff. I seem to remember, even though I had issues with him, there was a prime minister of Haiti named Jovenel Moise, who was machine gunned. The prime minister of Haiti under the Biden administration, him and his wife, both. His wife lived, but she was hit with machine gun fire. And the assassins were trained by the DEA. The United States government then came in and grabbed a couple of them and said, oh, we'll take them home and we'll deal with it. But, it was clearly the hand of the U.S. empire in the assassination. And they made, the Biden administration made deals to bring in African mercenaries and oppress, to do everything they can to oppress the rights of the Haitian people to have independence and sovereignty. And I think I would like to get your thoughts on the state of affairs with Haiti. And the real horror is that in the media and in the conversation in the U.S., that Haiti is not even discussed, as the Haitian people are starved and oppressed year in and year out.
Garland, a couple of years ago, when the people went through the streets, this was in early 2022, to demand democracy. In fact, this is 2021, to demand that there be a real commitment to a transition in Haiti. And those images of all those Black people in the tens of thousands demonstrating and calling for democracy, you would think that would have been inspiration to progressive and left forces in the West and in the U.S. in particular. But instead, all they ended up doing, in a strange way, Garland, was creating the foundation for the narrative that was then floated by imperialism. That is, these Black Haitians are unable to govern themselves. They are engaged in internal warfare. These voodoo supporting semi-human people are unable to survive without external intervention. And to our somewhat surprise, not so much me, people start buying into that and believing that instead of seeing a authentic and powerful political movement developing in Haiti, that it was all about just internal chaos and violence. And then you start floating down all the stuff about the gangs and all of this, and so the foundation, the racist foundation, was laid by the racist Biden administration to then justify the intervention of forces, U.S. forces, basically under the guise of Kenyan forces into Haiti, all with the objective of doing what? Undermining Haitian democracy and the possibility of a progressive government coming to power in Haiti. Haiti is key. Haiti is key to the Caribbean. Haiti is key to the Americas. If you have a progressive government in Haiti that can work and will work with the government in Venezuela and the government in Cuba and Nicaragua, you have a very solid foundation. That, and then with the final liberation of Puerto Rico, you're seeing then the transition in the Americas that needs to take place, a transition back not to the so-called pink tide, but a stronger color of progressive and revolutionary forces in the Americas. And so Haiti is key, and that's why, for example, the Black Alliance for Peace has a Haiti's Americas team that's been working feverishly, trying to help people to understand the complexities of Haiti, and for them to be in support of those efforts on the part of Haitian people themselves for their own national liberation. But last quick point on this: the fact that the U.S. is able to pull off bringing in these Kenyan troops into Haiti under the guise of Pan-Africanism is a very ominous development, and that has to be broken. It has to be beaten back. Also, we don't need what I call neoliberal Pan-Africanism.
I agree. And before we go, you did mention the Black Alliance for Peace. I want people to see. Let me find it here. This is another great resource, blackallianceforpeace.com. A people-centered human rights project against war, repression, and imperialism. You see there. Lots of great things going on here. Burkina Faso, Musa Springer, the U.S. Empire, with all kinds of various things going on here. Malcolm X Day, on and on. African Liberation Day 2025. Lots of things going on with the Black Alliance for Peace. We've got, no compromise, no retreat. So the Black Alliance for Peace does a lot of great work internationally, a lot of great stuff for Haiti and Africa and really all of Gaza, all over the world. And I really appreciate the work that you all do at the Black Alliance for Peace. And I recommend that people go to blackallianceforpeace.com, keep up with the various things. They have various projects and ways that people can join, ways that people can get involved, etc. blackallianceforpeace.com is the place to go. Ajamu, I want to thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll get you back next week. And if you have the time, maybe we can do a weekly thing.
Coffee. Follow me.